the national government at the same time. So I urge the Ministry of Ranch, the ministry in charge of county government, the governor himself, he should take full responsibility of the mess that is taking place at Langata Cemetery. I therefore support this motion and say thank you very much, my member of parliament, because I am your member of parliament. I'm waiting for you to call me so that you can give me my bursary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Before we hear more horror stories from the MP and residents of Langata, allow me to introduce pupils in the gallery, public gallery. Regis View Academy from Naivasha, from my own county of Nakuru County. On my own behalf, join me in the House. Welcome to observe the proceedings of the House. The next speaker will be the member for Mandera West, Honorable Adan Haji. Not in the House. Member for Tharaka, Honorable Gitonga Murugara.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this motion by the Honorable Felix Odiwo, alias Jalango. He is a well-known legislator in the country and a media personality. A little history about the Langata Cemetery is that, in fact, it's the only cemetery that was set aside since the advent of colonialism for burial rituals. As you know very well, Africans were not burying their dead, and therefore it does not surprise many when we hear that hyenas are feasting on dead bodies, because that was the norm those days. Dead bodies were recipe for hyenas. If you carefully look at the Langata Cemetery, it was segregated as it were at that time. There was a section for the Europeans, a section for the Asians, and the Africans were given the far-flung corner where not many bodies were buried anyway those days. And the first to be overused was the European section, because Asians could cremate from time to time, while Europeans were actually burying their dead. Eventually, Africans were brought into the practice of burials, and because they were larger in number, it has now overstripped the size of the land available for those burials. What the Europeans do today, and I have witnessed this, is they reuse their graves, which is common with the European culture, such that if the father died long time ago, followed by the mother and the children, they may all be buried in one grave, just by recouping the soil and burying the dead. The Asians have taken up mostly to cremation, while the Africans now are actually overstretching the piece of land that was available to them, as a result of which there are no procedures, and if there are procedures, they are not well planned. This is why we now have the shallow graves into which you put the bodies, and if you're not careful, two things happen. Hyenas will feast on the dead bodies, where possibly the coffins are not very well done. If you use a very good coffin in Langata Cemetery, you got to be careful, because the following day you may find the body of your relative actually outside, because some thief snitched the coffin when you were fast asleep. This is quite common. These are the horror stories we hear from Langata. But what is most important is for the government to relook at the issue of cemeteries, because we do have other towns that are nearby, which possibly have areas and lands which can be set aside for burial places, so that we are able to give our dead people dignified send-off. Kiambu is one of such. Kiambu is one of such towns. I know for sure there was a time there was hue and cry regarding grabbing of the cemetery land in Kiambu, and there is an interesting story told about an MP who defected in the 90s. He was rewarded with a piece of land, which eventually was traced into the cemetery of Kiambu. This is exactly how uncaring we are. as regards how we treat dead people, that we can actually give out land set aside for them, as a result of which we all go to Langata to crowd the place, try to bury people in a manner that is not well planned, in a manner that is not dignified, which is totally un-African. As I sum up, we should extend the planning of gravesites into the countryside. There is a bad practice that happens in the countryside where everybody is trying to cement graves, and the consequence is that it's going to be in 50 years' time, you will have no land, no arable land to cultivate, because you filled your entire land with cemented graves. It's not a good practice. It should be discouraged. The county governments, the national governments should now stand up and have good policies, acceptable policies on burials and grave sites. With those remarks, I do support.
Thank you. The next chance will go to member from Lugari, Honorable Nabuera Nabi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I raise to support the motion by the Honorable Member for Langata. And Madam Speaker, I want from the onset to state that the biggest danger that the ongoings at Langata Cemetery poses is a health hazard that can cause an epidemic never seen before in this country. As we are aware, the cemetery is within the vicinity of an informal settlement. As we are aware, the cemetery is next to an army barrack. As we are aware, most of the graves in that cemetery are already open. Madam Speaker, it is a national catastrophe awaiting to happen. We all know that the city of Nairobi has a problem of drainage, which means anytime we have a lot of rains, bodies are all washed into settlements, they are washed into the Nairobi, in the rivers, and therefore we are causing a health hazard to the populace of Nairobi. Madam Speaker, it is a requirement of World Bank. In fact, I'm worried that World Bank might stop funding the city of Nairobi under KUSIP arrangement. Why? Because one of the requirements is that a city or an urban center which they fund must have a proper cemetery. I would not want to define Langata Cemetery as a proper cemetery. Therefore, I'm calling upon the Ministry of Health to close Langata Cemetery and force Nairobi City government to allocate and identify another land and allocate for cemetery if they must continue accessing money under the KUSIP arrangement. Madam Speaker, I want to associate myself with my colleague in also urging that each constituency in Nairobi must have a cemetery of its own. Why? Because of the numbers, because of the population. Madam Speaker, I want to confirm to you that whereas I come from Western Kenya, I've been forced to carry bodies of people who die, who ordinarily, young kids who would ordinarily be buried in a cemetery, but because of a lack of a proper cemetery, they opt to go to carry the body to Western Kenya, because they fear if the body is buried in Langata Cemetery, one, it may be washed away, it may be eaten by animals, they cannot come and do an annual ceremony as it is in our tradition. Madam Speaker, I will want to give you the most demeaning thing I went through, and this house went through. We lost one of us in this house who was a Muslim, and by nature of the Muslim culture, the burial was immediate. We were standing on bodies, on graves that we have gone to bury our... I mean, it was so demeaning for some of us. I'm calling upon Ministry of Lands and Nairobi city government to identify land and allocate and therefore relocate the cemetery of Langata. And I'm calling on the Ministry of Health under the Public Health Act to declare Langata cemetery a health hazard. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The next chance will go to the member for Kilifi North, the Deputy Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. And I want to congratulate my brother, Felix Odiwar, Papa Jalas, for bringing this motion. Because the people of Langata for a very long time have suffered. Actually, the people of Nairobi have suffered. And the people of Langata bear the brunt of the whole Nairobi because everything is taken there. And it takes a great leader to come up and say, look, I need to solve this problem. And that's why I want to congratulate Papa Jalas for bringing this motion and trying to get a solution for Nairobi, not just for the people of Langata, but for the whole of Nairobi. And God bless you for those kind thoughts for the people of Nairobi. I would like to say that the issue of Langata Cemetery is about planning, land planning. And this country for many, many years has been using land without proper planning. There was a time when colonial masters then planned Nairobi and said, here there will be a cemetery. But thereafter, nobody has thought about planning this city. Things are just being put all over. And that is one of the greatest problems that we have in this country. We have today, there used to be the current Langata Association that had something like building control and zoning. And I think they went to court about issues like that. But after the court, these days you start seeing high-rise buildings coming up in Karen. You start seeing Kilimani used to be a beautiful place to stay. Now everybody is putting up anything everywhere. The problem is land planning. We have actually a department in the Ministry of Lands whose job is just physical planning and land planning, but no one does anything. In the previous government, I remember they were given a budget of around 34 million for a whole year to do land use planning. That is peanuts. That cannot be done. So, Honorable Odiwar, what I would like you to do is sit with the governor of Nairobi. And if the governor of Nairobi cannot sit with you, we will call him to this house. Because this city belongs to all of us. And the planning for city and ensuring that this city is properly governed is a responsibility of not just the people of Nairobi, but the whole of this country. To ensure that land use planning is done properly and ensure that people are given a decent burial. But the horror stories of Langata are well known. And I think we need to respect the dead. There are those who will have land of their own and bury people in their compound. There are those Kenyans who cannot afford to carry a body up country. They have to bury it here, but they don't have a place to bury. They have to exhume a body. But also I want to give you good news. If you cannot have a place to bury, we can create a place in Kilifi where bodies from Nairobi can be brought for burying. We have enough land, including the Shakahola area. We can give you enough land to do that. But I think this is an important motion, and I think the
Tandaza, what is out of order?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It is the majority leader in order to suggest that bodies, people dying in Nairobi should be carried to Kilifi, and yet he knows very well he doesn't have land for such purposes. And knowing very well it will also create a lot of inconvenience for the people of Nairobi. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
No, I'm trying to encourage domestic tourism also for the people of Kilifi. You know, there are many people who will come to Kilifi to do. But seriously, Honorable Speaker, I think this is a serious national issue. I think previous governments who did it in a dishonest way and we lost money, and people tried to buy land in Ukambani and things, you know. But I think this is one of the most honest attempts to ensure that we get another grave site for the people of Nairobi. So I want to thank you, Honorable, and I think I will ask you to sit down with the governor of Nairobi and ensure that the people of Nairobi get a decent send-off when they die. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Embakasi West, Honorable Mark.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this motion. In Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, I can tell you our population goes up to even 4 million, and even more at times, depending with the seasons. And we can assure you that since Nairobi was founded, the only public cemetery that exists, that is in use today, is in Langata. Now, if we look at the population that we have, and I can give you statistics. I represent Embakasi West, which has a population of about 300,000. I'm aware of Embakasi North, which has about a similar number. Embakasi East, that carries 360,000. Same as Embakasi South, that has about 360,000. Embakasi Central, that has about another 300,000. Kasarani, that has 400,000. Roy Sambu, that has 300,000. All those people who have spoken of constituencies that are on the eastern side of this city, we all go to bury our dead. If we cannot take them up country, we all go to Langata. It is impossible. Those numbers are too high. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, we have land further down towards the end of Nairobi, and we can cross even into the Ukambani area on that end. We who come from that end do not need to bury our dead in Langata. So it falls on us and this house in this time that we can sit and correct the mistakes that have happened for years and decades, that we have refused to plan for this city. Honorable Speaker, I'll be coming up on the next with a motion that will demonstrate how we have failed this city. The failure to plan for our city has led to uncontrolled planning, and that is why the same issue you're seeing in Langata, where you can go and bury somebody, we've been there and we've buried our friends, and you can see an open grave where you can see even the casket itself. That is the most degrading thing that we can do to our departed dead. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it is time. This motion is very timely, and this should not be a matter that should be taken for granted. Past government tried even to buy land. I remember there was, I don't know whether it was in Mavoko, but we were taken around in circles. As much as we say we want to leave this matter to the county of to the county government of Nairobi, I do not think the county government of Nairobi can handle this matter. That's why I think it is the way the Honorable Jalango has decided to bring this matter to this house. It is important that we support him because Nairobi belongs to all of us. And this should be a matter that we as our government should be able to find land in our surrounding counties. We have Kajiado to the south, we have Machakos, we have Kiambu. Those are the counties that border us. It is important we liaise with them, and this can only be done through the national government. So we are able to find land in those counties and be able to bury our dead in those areas. So with that, Honorable Speaker, I think this motion by the Honorable Jalango is important, and I will support him that it is time that we close Langata Cemetery, but it is important that by the time we close it, because attempts have been there and they've tried to close it, but if we do not come up with a solution, we are left with no choice than to bury our dead in Langata. So, Honorable Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Kangundo, Honorable Fabian.
Thank you very much, Honorable Madam Speaker, for giving the opportunity to hear my voice on this motion brought by our colleague, Honorable Felix Odwol, aka Jalango. Honorable Madam Speaker, from onset, I support the motion. And the great philosophers note that the living must take care of the dead. If today we are living, we cannot take care of our brothers and our sisters who are dead. Who are we living for? What are we living for? If you see the scene, and before I continue, I want to send the word of condolences to the brothers and sisters who their parents are lying or their family members are laying in Langata. And may their soul rest in peace. If today you see the happening within the Langata cemetery, you cannot believe the space which is there. You cannot even believe when you go to bury, like one colleague has said, they went to bury their brothers, the other bodies they are there. So immediately you finish putting your body, they remove it, they bring another one. And this has only caused by poor planning. The Nairobi count has not only failed through Langata cemetery. We have seen many happening with this city where there is total failure in terms of planning of the city. People are given right to build the buildings. Then after you finish building your building, it is in the river, it is demolished. People will continue. Even sometimes you see people's building being demolished, but they are being built in the road. Same way as what is happening in Langata. So it is the high time. Not only we are saying we move to the means of health, it is the high time matters of the land, we put them to the national government rather than to keep it to the county government of Nairobi. As we speak, Madam Speaker, we have a very huge disaster coming to Karen. This parliament purported to building a house of 32 floors in Karen. It is as all they approved by the county government of Nairobi. Then you ask them, what brain do you use when you approve some things? Karen is aviation center, that's why we don't have high buildings. Same way Langata has been gazetted as a disaster long time. As we pass there, it is very crazy. You see bodies. It is a body of a human being, not a body of a cow, not a body of a dog. It is lying in capital city of Kenya, openly daylight. And then you see also other people pushing their boat to go bury there. Then they continue to say that they have a planning department in Nairobi. I join my club by saying that the Langata cemetery should go to national government. And it's the high time this parliament, we set funds for respect of the dead. We set funds, we buy a land, not only one place, tackling the many corners of Nairobi, because death is within us and the death we are working with it. So we cannot say that the only option we have is Langata. So, Honorable Madam Speaker, I support and I say Nairobi City Council planning officers should be in jail for what they are doing to this city. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Dorothy Kier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this very important motion by Honorable Odwell, Member of Parliament Langata. Honorable Speaker, I begin with an adage that says that the best brains lie in the cemetery. Indeed, Madam Speaker, we are not just talking about Langata. We are talking about a place where bodies are just dumped in a shallow or permanent grave, depending on one's means or the discretion of the people left behind. We are talking about the next temporary or permanent resident of children, youth, men, women, legislators seated here, Honorable Speaker, when all of us, we exit from this life. Then this begs for the next question, Honorable Speaker. Do dead people have dignity? The Constitution of Kenya, in the Bill of Rights, confers the right to inherent dignity, and that dignity to be respected, and the people who die should be protected. If you walk around Langata Cemetery today, Honorable Speaker, you wonder whether we adhere to this Constitution that says even the dead have and deserve dignity. Honorable Speaker, we are perturbed today. We are talking of a place that was set aside by the colonial masters. That means as a country, we should feel ashamed talking about Langata Cemetery very many years after independence. We have not taken any steps to either improve on the same or continue on where the colonial masters left us. Honorable Speaker, I am saying this with a lot of pain because the people lying at Langata Cemetery and all of us seated here today, whether it will be Langata Cemetery or elsewhere, we shall one day be there, and soon and very soon, because nobody of us has permanent immunity over death. Honorable Speaker, it is the high time that we prepare that final resting place for ourselves when we are still alive. And it is the responsibility of the registrators seated here today. And this is why I say, that's up, Honorable Oduor, because you are thinking about yourself. You are thinking about the future generation. And we should not look at the graves and think they are only graves. There are people known to us. Honorable Speaker, when you go to Langata today, you'll find plaques. You'll find every grave as a title and a name. But unfortunately, because of the double allocation of the graves, the person who is buried there is not the person who owns that plaque that is mounted there. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying the county government of Nairobi is obligated to ensure that they take the immediate steps of improving that cemetery now, so that we don't talk about a place that there is nothing we can do about it, whereas we have all the mechanisms that we can use to improve on that particular place. Honorable Speaker, we should also take cognizance of the fact that this place should be well taken care of in terms of this place should have toilets, this place should have places like wash areas, this place should have water points, the bushes must be cleared so that when people go there to check on their loved ones, they have a dignified place where they can go relax and have fine memories of the people who have been put there. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying the county government in the constitution is also obligated to ensure that they set aside. Honorable Speaker, I can see my time is up, but I'm saying the county government also should set aside areas where people should be buried in dignity.
Thank you, Honorable Dorothy. Your time is up. Member for Alego Usonga, Honorable Samuel Atandi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this motion by Honorable Jalango is a very important motion. It is a fact that Langata Cemetery has reached its capacity. Also, it's a fact that the previous attempts have been made to try to create a new cemetery for Nairobi residents. That site which was also highlighted by the MP for Buri, that Nairobi City Council, the defunct Nairobi City Council tried to actually buy land in Machakos County to support the cemetery activities for Nairobi residents. But it became scandalous. And I think EACC has been pursuing those people who were involved in that scandal. Madam Speaker, what I want to say is that it is time Kenyans, and in fact it is time leaders need to urge Kenyans to pursue various other methods of burying the dead. This type of burying the dead, where ground burial of the dead is outdated. We need to think of other ways. And Madam Speaker, as leadership, we need to champion other methods. Because there's no reason why we have to, carry a casket from here to Suba or to Alego. What is the purpose of doing that? Let us, instead of actually urging, for, creating of more burial sites, let us think of other methods like cremation. Cremation now is very popular, Madam Speaker, and it is very easy. Personally, Madam Speaker, the fact that the Langata cemetery is full has brought a lot of problems for some of us. who come from very traditional families, who represent constituents who are still very traditional, who believe that you must carry a casket from here to Siaya, and there are prayers overnight, and burial and feasting. It is very expensive, Madam Speaker, to bury somebody today, especially if that person is a Luo. You have to budget. We do very huge budgets, Madam Speaker. It is unnecessary. So what we need to do, Madam Speaker, as leadership is let's champion other methods. And this is going to be very cost effective. Personally, Madam Speaker, I've told my family that if I die, I should be cremated. It is going to be very easy. There will be no expenses, etc. So, whereas we want to urge the Nairobi County and the government to look for other pieces of land for burials, personally, I think the option that we need to pursue is this other methods. It will be very good, cheap for us, and environmentally, I don't know if it is even better for us to be burying or be cremating. We need to find out from some research if there's aunties in this house to tell us the impact of on the environment these burials that have happened in Langata Cemetery. I think it has some environmental impact on us. So should we find that these graves are environmental hazards, I think we need to abandon it. And so, whereas I support the motion as presented by the Honorable Jalango, we need to think outside the box and pursue other methods of burial. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Before we give the next member, allow me to recognize a delegation in the Speaker's Gallery, Machakos County University and Students Association from Machakos Town Constituency, Machakos County. On my own behalf, and as a product of student leadership, myself and many others in this house, allow me to welcome them to observe the proceedings of the house. The next member would be Honorable Farah Malim.
Excuse me. Yeah. Speaker, thank you very much. It's very interesting to have a motion that discusses the state of our cemeteries in Nairobi. Whereas I appreciate the fact that we need to seriously respect the dead, the big question one needs to ask is that, is it the dead who are encroaching on the living, or is it the living who are encroaching on the dead? Honorable members, this place was planned very well by the colonialists. And in that planning, what's the problem?
The time is up. Oh, go on.
Order. This place was very well planned. But there has been very ambitious development in the city itself. This city has expanded to something like 10 times what it was at independence. And I don't know whether we're trying to find dignity for the dead, or this is going to create a situation in which developers will see this as a very prime line and have to see a situation in which the cemetery itself is expanded. Because the cemetery is next to a forest, and the forest is big. And I have a feeling that it was invaded from both the north, and on the other side, of course, there's a freeway. Having said that, I still agree with what Honorable Ward is saying, that dignity has got to be there. The other thing is, why are we finding bodies out there? Is it because people have invaded the graves themselves to look for valuables, or the graves are shallow? I was reading the other day that although there's a book, the very famous historical settler Macmillan, who was, I think, a library named after him, his grave was raided and the body is no longer there. I don't know what to say about that. But I know of also what you call the grave thieves. So more than anything else, what we need to do is that we have to have a system in place of the national government in which the police, as a national government function, protect the dead. The citizens cannot protect the dead. And also to put down standards for graves. The graves have got to be at least 5 feet deep. They don't have to be shallow. Who makes them shallow? Is it the county government or the national government or the people of Kenya? No. The families who are going to dig, what they call bury the dead there, must be told that these graves have got to be a certain standard, and the standard itself has got to be regulated, and that regulation itself has got to be enforced. I can hear some people want to see a situation like when we introduce some cremation. The Honorable Atandi, as much as cremation might appeal to you, but it is in line with the faith of the Hindu community, and I don't think cremation is anything that can be considered by Muslims and Christians and Jews for that matter, because this is what you call the Abrahamic faiths, the monotheism. We have to bury our dead somewhere, and they have to have a grave. So I think what we need to do is that we not only see it very simplistically and say that close this place. No, we can't close. If tomorrow I lose my relative, and I lose them every other day, and I lose my fellow religious men, where do I take them? Because the thing is closed. We don't have a situation of sending them to our home areas. That's not part of our culture. It's not our faith. It's actually the directive of the faith that the body should be buried the same day that the person deceases and becomes a body. You know, you're a name, first of all. You're Farah, you're War, you're Martha, you're John, you're Joseph. But the day you die, you cease to have a name. You become a body. So the body itself must be interred, in our case, immediately, the same day. It doesn't matter whether you come from Mandera or you come from Germany or you come from wherever. If I die in Germany myself, my body will not be brought back. I'll be buried in Germany. And the same applies to all Muslims all over the world. So we can't close that thing. But what I want to see is that, do we have a lot of land up there, and is there an encroachment by the developers? And why was that allowed in the first place? Why were the developers allowed to encroach on the land that was set aside for the cemeteries from the colonial time? Why can the county government and the national government create a dignity for that? One, by having standards, and two, by making sure that this thing is protected. There are always people out there moving in the cemeteries, protecting the cemeteries. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. In my opinion, it's not so very simplistic. I do agree with the fact that burying the dead in Kenya for my Christian brothers and sisters is a very expensive thing. And somehow we all basically we sympathize and empathize and see the problems that families suffer. A family that does not have the bare minimum, 3 square meters.
Your time is up. Honorable Ken Chonga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this motion by Honorable Jalango. Historically, Madam Speaker, we were told there are some communities which never used to bury the dead. Instead, they used to throw them in the bush. Then they're eaten by, I don't know, animals. Historically, we are hearing that. But what is happening today, world over, we know there are only 3 methods of burying. One is cremating, bury as we do. And Nairobi, if we look at Nairobi, we are in a cosmopolitan town where all communities live here. And the only respect that we give our departed souls is by burying. Madam Speaker, Langata Cemetery was declared full in 2008. By 2008, the county council was then supposed to have found alternative means as where people can be buried. But pathetically, as up to today, we are trooping back to Langata. Madam Speaker, allow me to use a word here. I don't know, it's a word or a term. I think greed is too much among our our people, more especially our civil servants. Because by 2008, if this cemetery had already been declared full, honestly, something ought to have been done. And it is on record, Madam Speaker, in 2010, some almost $13 million was released to purchase a piece of land to extend the Langata cemetery. It was alleged that 48 acres was bought, but it came out clear that it was a scam and it's only 10 acres which were procured. So, over 38 acres where we could be able to bury our people was taken away by people who were greedy to what have been allocated for the same. Madam Speaker, so much has been said. People will actually look at the issue of relocating Langata Cemetery to somewhere else differently, but it needs to be understood. For as long as a solution is not found, then we shall keep on punishing our dead ones. Madam Speaker, we bury in Langata because it's not because everybody wants to bury in Langata. You can imagine the cost of transporting a body from here to Kilifi. It is honestly cheaper to bury this person in Langata. We bury in Langata, Madam Speaker, because there are people who do not have anywhere else to bury their people apart from here. We bury here because you find there are some people who are totally homeless. That's the reason why we bury there. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of them are buried at Langata, and we have no alternative to that. Madam Speaker, time is up. This motion is timely. There is need for the county government to come up with a measure as soon as possible so that the dead can have the respect that they deserve wherever they go to lay. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I stand and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Embakasi North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this opportunity also to contribute towards this motion. Madam Speaker, having been an elected member for 3 consecutive terms, I have also served in the City Council of Nairobi, formerly in the County of Nairobi, formerly City Council of Nairobi. And it is true, Madam Speaker, that back 2008, the City Council of Nairobi appropriated money to buy land for that particular purpose of gravesite. It's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that corruption went away with all of what was appropriated to buy the grave. I want to be part of the members who have alluded that there was a misuse of funds, but it is true that actually after buying or buying that particular Mafoko grave, Madam Speaker, what happened is that those who planned and those who want to assess that particular land, there is one factor that was not done well, and this is the quality of that particular soil, because that soil is cotton soil, and cotton soil cannot go away along with burial, because what you do is that during the rainy season, after rain, then that casket is brought out by those heavy water, and therefore the land became unsuitable for burial. In this case, it's a case that has been ongoing, and you remember very well, members, that the former clerk of this of the City Council of Nairobi find his death in a jail after the verdict made by the court of law after the hearing of that particular case. In this case, Madam Speaker, I want to allude that Nairobi is a totally cosmopolitan, and there are those people who are who belongs in the city. Those has no anywhere else they can call home. Those people, Madam Speaker, must be taken care of. because they are not those that we can say that they migrated from Muranga, or they migrated from Osonga, or they migrated from elsewhere. They found themselves here, and they call themselves Nairobians. Those people are very important, and they are the people that we do represent. And Madam Speaker, it is
you're totally out of order. You're totally out of order, and you know. Go to the bar and bow. Continue, Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a long overdue that up to date, we have Langata Cemetery as the only option for burial to our departed friends. This is, to me, a route that has taken ages, and we must come to a stop where the county council, the county of Nairobi, should take it as a priority, and as a priority and appropriate money for that particular aspect, and do enough research. At any other site that may find soil, they must first do enough research to know whether the soil is adequate for this particular purpose, so that we cannot find ourselves in the same scenario that we find ourselves in 2008. And if that is done, Madam Speaker, it will go along with arresting our friends on a dignity place. The way the Langata the cemetery is of today, Madam Speaker, it is totally ironical. You cannot even dare to know how the situation it is. But we have no choice, and I cannot stand here to advocate that we close it because we have no alternative. And as I have alluded there before, those members who cause Nairobi their home have nowhere to bury their departed ones. And therefore, what I would ask is that both the national government and the county of Nairobi should hastily move on and make sure that actually there is already an alternative site where the RAD should be bought, and then we reserve for this particular purpose. And for that, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Member for Kwanza, Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi.
Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity first and foremost to thank our colleague Jalango for having come up with this particular motion. It's very, very embarrassing. I had buried a relative there. Madam Speaker, it's embarrassing. It's very painful. That I think, Honorable Jalango, I think do something on that side for the time being. Even if it means building a concrete fence around the place, because as stated by the Honorable Member, while animals actually get to the site, exhume particularly the fresh calves and feed on the date. We all know that we respect as Kenyans, as Africans, we respect the date. I buried a relative there who didn't have land up country. And what happened? We found that actually the body was actually thrown out. First, because we have youths who go and remove the coffins. It was a very expensive coffin, and threw away because they have nothing to lose. So, Honorable Member, do something about it so that you can defend the area. First, maybe build a wall around it if we can. And if not, then of course we have to call the Minister for Health. That has nothing to do with the county government, because the county government is unable, unless we go to the Senate to force the county government to look for land. Otherwise, we are going to go around the whole thing, but we want to give you the shortest time possible, and we will support you to the last end to be able to get at least an alternative for this Langata cemetery, which is a very, very old cemetery. Secondly, there are those actually who would want to bury and burn the date. That again is on African, as somebody has just mentioned. So I am saying that we should look for the money and come up with a budget. We look for the land around Nairobi. even if it means getting 20 acres, Madam Speaker, to be able to look for alternative site to bury the dead. It's so inhuman. You go there and see yourself, particularly in the mornings. Madam Speaker, you will not even like to go back. The sight is unbelievable. If you are a human being, if you are an African like I am, you will never go back. And many, of course, most of the people being buried here have no land up country. It is true. Secondly, you want to help, like I've helped a few people to take the bodies up country. It's very expensive to go to where I come from, Transoya. You're not going to spend less than 200,000-300,000 shillings to get the body here. Maybe with the relatives, what have you. And the Nairobi is actually not just for people in Nairobi. It's a national city. So we all belong to this city. And therefore, I think the best again we can do, please come up, look for it. Ask us, we'll be able to, some of us have been in Nairobi for this time, to people look for a good site, even if it means going as far as the Gong side, what have you, for Langata B. That is Langata A, Langata B, to be able to have our dead buried there. Madam Speaker, you know, you hear the stories, and as people are explaining, it is so certain that I think the alternative is to go the Asian way, which again is non-African. Yeah, you buy when somebody's dead, you know, you burn the date. Again, that's not African. You'll be cast. I believe if I buried my grandson, whatever, here, instead of burying and burning the body, I think it will haunt me the whole year. It will haunt me the rest of my time. So therefore, Honorable Chalang, we are with you. Come up with a budget. Let's move to Langata B. I support your motion.
Thank you. Member for Mandera South.
Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, and I will say from the word go that I fully support the motion by Honorable Felix Odio, member for Langata, and I'll particularly zero in on the prayers that are in that motion, where the Honorable member is urging the national government through the Ministry of Health to urgently conduct an assessment of the public health risks posed by the continued use of Langata Cemetery, and to institute mitigatory measures and collaborate with other stakeholders, including the Nairobi City Council government, to identify suitable alternative land for use as cemetery. That prayer, I think, is well put. It's timely and most welcome. The Langata Cemetery is actually I think it's the largest cemetery in the country, and it's serving the entire Nairobi, all the constituencies in Nairobi. And I know particularly the Muslim people who are professing Muslim faith, they take most of their dead to Langata Cemetery for those who die in Nairobi for burial. And the question around overcrowding is a key thing. I agree with the other member who said it's a bit pathetic when you go bury your dead and you step into the graves of other people's dead. You know, the question of decency and decent send-off of our beloved ones is a question which is very dear to our hearts. And this motion is coming at a time when, as a country and also as a city, we are dealing with increasing population. And although we have made a lot of gains in terms of health improvements of our people, we are also having an increase in mortality, and therefore there is increasing need for land, and there is competing need for land between different competing land use, which burial being one of it. And therefore we need more lands for burial, and as one member put earlier, that land will not only be required for burying the dead, for just digging the graves. We will need that land to also create some parking space for the people who come and bury their loved ones. We will need some facilities, sanitation facilities in that land, and we will need toilets, water facilities in that land, and therefore there is demand for bigger lands for burial in Nairobi, and particularly in Langata, which is the main burial site for the people who die in Nairobi. And therefore, I support this motion fully, and I thank once again the other member, Felix Odier, for bringing this motion at this very timely time. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Matuga.
Asante Madam Speaker kwa kunipatia fursa hii kuchangia kwa huu mswada muhimu, kwa sababu sote tunajua tulioko hai, na haya ni maneno ya Mwenyezi Mungu kwa sisi Waislamu. Kwa kitabu chetu kitukufu Quran kuna aya inayosema kwamba kullu nafsi dhaikatul maut, sote tutaionja mauti. Kwa hivyo hili si swala la mjadala, na sote tunajua hasa kwa sisi Waislamu kwamba mtu anapokufa mambo manne ni lazima yafanyike, ikiwa kumuosha, kumvika sanda, kumsalia na hatimaye kumzika. Hili tulifahamu vizuri. Kumzika sio kumchoma kama vile wengine wanaozungumza. Kwa sisi ambao tuna imani thabiti ya dini, na hii na imani ni sote Waislamu na Wakristo, tunajua ukifa ima utaenda peponi ama utaenda motoni. Sasa hata ikiwa mmoja ana imani kwamba yeye ni mtu wa motoni, sioni haja ya kwamba aanze kuchomwa akiwa hapa. Hili pia ni jambo jingine ambalo linashangaza. Pengine mwenyewe unajua moja kwa moja utaenda motoni, lakini unatuambia tuanze kukuchomea hapa hata kabla uende ukamwone kabla siku ya hukumu. Hili ni jambo la kushangaza na halipo katika imani ya dini zote ambazo huwa zinatumika. Pengine wenzetu wa Hindi ama wale wanaotaka kuchomwa labda tayari wao hawaamini kwamba kuna njia nyingine isipokuwa tu kubaki motoni. Lakini kwa Mkristo na Muislamu hili ni jambo ambalo haliingia akilini. Kwa hivyo kuzika ni lazima. Langata na imani wakati ilipoanzishwa, haikuanzishwa kwa watu wa Langata. Ilianzishwa wakati huo ikiwa Nairobi, na imani ilikuwa na watu wachache. Mwaka wa 58 Nairobi ilikuwa na watu wachache, na imani ilipokuwa pale iliwekwa ikiwa pia ilikuwa mbali na mji, haikuwa katikati ya mji kama vile ilivyo. Iliwekwa pale sio kwamba ilikuwa ni constituency ya Langata mwaka 58. Iliwekwa kama sehemu ikiwa mbali na mji na wa Nairobi wote. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa mbunge mwenzetu Jalango, ni jambo la kuhuzunisha kuona kwamba sehemu yake kubwa pia inatumika kwa wafu ambao moja kwa moja hawamsaidii kupiga kura. Wale walioko pale hawamsaidii, lakini kama watu wanavyochangia ni kwamba bado aendelee kupelekewa watu kuzikwa sehemu ile, na labda kuona ni vipi atasaidiwa. Mimi maoni yangu ni kwamba Nairobi hii kila eneo bunge, kwa sababu Kenya hakuna mahali ambapo si eneo bunge, kila eneo bunge wakati county government ikianza kufikiria swala hili iweze kutengewa mahali kwake kwa kuzika watu, kwa sababu watu watazikwa. Na hali ya Nairobi ilivyo na tatizo la magari, ya msongamano wa magari, mimi nadhania mtu ambaye atakuwa ametoka sehemu za Kasarani na mahali pa kuzika peke yake ni Langata. Kitambo magari yatoke Kasarani kuja Langata na msongamano wa magari, hilo ni huzuni hata kabla ya kufikiria kwamba umefiliwa na mtu wako. Kwa hivyo suluhisho, kila pembe ya Nairobi iweze kupata maeneo ya kuzika. Na hili pia sitoe nafasi kwa serikali ya ugatuzi ya Nairobi kama ilivyotokea wakati ule, kwamba sasa wao wamepata nafasi ya kupata mchongo pale ndani, kwa sababu tunajua ikiwa ni kuzika wafu unahitaji ardhi ambayo inafaa. Sielewi kwa nini wakati ule waliweza kununua shamba la mawe, ni kama ambapo ilikuwa watu wa Nairobi wanataka ujenzi wao na mawe mengi, na ili hali ilikuwa ni sehemu ya kuzika watu. Kwa hivyo hili pia isiwe itakuwa imetoa nafasi ya kununua sehemu ambazo moja kwa moja tunajua kwamba hazitafaa, na ili hali tunajua kwamba Langata ni mahali ambapo saa hizi kuweze kufungwa, kuweze kuhifadhiwa, na ile sehemu kama ipo uwezekano kitaalam uweze kufanywa marekebisho, watu waweze kuishi, watu wa Langata waweze kuongezeka, watu wa Langata waweze kuishi kwa hadhi ambayo itafaa. Mheshimiwa Spika, ninaunga mkono hoja hii. Asante kwa kunipa nafasi.
Thank you. Member for Kirinyaga Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to be on record supporting my brother, Mheshimiwa Jalango, for this timely motion. Mr. Speaker, where we come from, we normally say that death is an appointment that you cannot avoid. And Mr. Speaker, since I was born, I've never heard of anybody trying to plan and prepare for their death apart from the late Honorable Martin Shikuku, where he had even prepared his graveyard. Mr. Speaker, before I joined politics, that was 2008, I remember there was a case that the former PS by the name Sam Kirui and others like John Gaku were jailed for 3 years for a certain cemetery with appropriation of 283 million, something like that. Mr. Speaker, I think it is the duty of this House to make a follow-up, because now that we are jailed for 3 years, and I remember John Gaku, the man, the town clerk who had planted a lot of trees around Nairobi, died in prison. What happened to the money, or what happened to that piece of land? Mr. Speaker, I would like to fault the urban planning department of City of Nairobi, because, Mr. Speaker, if we are only approving housing, we are extending our roads, it means our population is still growing, Mr. Speaker. My question is, why aren't we planning for the dead? Because we need to give them dignities, Mr. Speaker. I was a victim. We were laying somebody very close to me in Langata Cemetery, and Mr. Speaker, it's a bit worrying when you go there, because you are asked, what kind of grave do you want? Do you want the temporary one or the permanent one? The temporary one is where they can bury today, and you don't have any control. Mr. Speaker, because of what my brother Jalango talked about, like a double allocation of graveyards, if you take a dead person to Langata and you bury them with a good coffin, Mr. Speaker, it is normally stored before the close of the day. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is something that we need to follow up, so that, because Nairobi belongs to all of us, even if we come from rural constituencies, because we don't plan when we'll die, and anything can happen, and we are in the same Langata, Mr. Speaker. I also want to echo the sentiments of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, who have indicated that every constituency should have at least a cemetery and they can bury the dead. From where I come, Mr. Speaker, we have about 25 colonial villages. All these colonial villages do not have anywhere for cemetery, Mr. Speaker. So if we were to segment per each constituency to have a common cemetery, Mr. Speaker, I think we will be sorting out this problem, and I will urge my brother Honorable Jalango that because of bringing this time motion, he should sit with the governor of Nairobi. They see how they can have a chat and talk about it. And because of bringing this motion, Mr. Jalango, as much as I'm not the appointing authority, I would say that your sins have been forgiven and do not be called for those things in ODM. I support it.
Honorable Jalango, don't be fooled. He doesn't speak for the ODM. Member for Super South.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to add my voice to this motion. I was actually supposed to second it, but I was delayed somewhere, so my apologies to Mheshimiwa Jalango. Something always captures my mind when it comes to deaths and the way we as Africans relate to it. I think there's a lot of mystique or mysticism associated with death. Yet I see it simply as a natural biological process. But we tend to get into a certain state of mind when we experience death that even our rationality may become questionable. But on the economic side, I think the poor get to be the most affected when we suffer death. If you attend a rich man's funeral, it may be elegant, but if you look at the expenses involved, they tend to be very manageable, as opposed to a poor man's funeral, which tends to be very expensive. With respect to this particular motion, I think it is timely and we should support it. Though I also understand that the issue of managing cemeteries is a devolved function. But I think for Nairobi, being the capital city and being the pace setter, this House should take a keen interest, and the national government as well, and see how to support Nairobi County government in getting additional land for a proper cemetery. Cemeteries, if you go to a lot of cities, just are not burial sites. Some of them are tourist attractions, actually. Yeah. In many, many countries, you go and you find cemeteries where heroes are buried, where famous people are buried. If you go to Arlington National Cemetery in US, a lot of tourists visit it to see the grounds where the Kennedy family and the rest of other people are buried. They also serve as national archives and family memorials, but also historical sites. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to encourage the population, all of us, that we begin to think differently about burials. My community, the Luo Nation, I've recently been informed, spends about 20 billion a year on funerals, both on transportation and food and the rest of it. I don't know whether that is sustainable. Lawyers probably spend more. But 20 billion a year on funerals is quite an expense. I think we should discourage individual home-based burials, where you have separate burials because of the present land titling system that we have, and instead encourage homesteads to have cemeteries within the homesteads as opposed to individual burial sites. I think it is also important that we encourage probably the administrative units, be they sub-locations or locations, or even churches, to have burial grounds for members who live around there. And for Nairobi City County Government, I think they should also consider, when they have a new burial site, a new cemetery, when they acquire new land for new cemetery, they should consider licensing multi-storied tombs. If you go to Louisiana, in New Orleans, in the United States, you will find tombs Zagorofa, multi-storied. So the newly dead are put in coffins at the lower levels. After a while, there's a cleaning process of the bones. They are packed, they are put to the next level, like that, like that. So if you go to New Orleans and have visited those cemeteries, you'll find a family from 1860, from the Civil War to present, with one tomb with all their names. I think we should consider that. And I think we should also encourage the devolved units, including Nairobi City Council, Nairobi City, County Government, to consider licensing entrepreneurs to establish private cemeteries. And finally, let me encourage the general population to consider alternative methods of disposing of the dead bodies. Cremation, donating our bodies to science, and those other methods that will make this thing affordable to everybody. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the motion.
Thank you. I'm not able to see the member for Mandera West. The member for Kitui East. Where do they go? The member for Marakwet West.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to address this matter. Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank the Honorable Member from Langata, Mheshimiwa Felix Oduor, for this very, very, very important motion that he has brought before the floor of this House. Honorable Speaker, it is unfortunate, and look at the substance of the motion. It has been said that Langata Cemetery was declared fully utilized 2 decades ago. Honorable Speaker, meaning that 20 years ago, this cemetery was declared fully utilized. and the same is being used currently to bury dead people. Honorable Speaker, in this country, we have failed to plan. And Honorable Speaker, a country that fails to plan plans to fail. Honorable Speaker, this plan was set up during the colonial period, and it was, Langata Cemetery was set up in proportionate to the population of Nairobi at that particular time. But the population of Nairobi has since increased significantly. Honorable Speaker, so therefore, there is need, absolutely, to set aside a section of this city so that we can be able to respect the wishes of the dead people. Honorable Speaker, that begs the question. Under Article 26 of the Constitution, there is a right to life. But the question is, do those rights extend to dead people? Honorable Speaker, reading Article 20, Honorable Speaker, it provides that every citizen is entitled to a Kenyan passport and documents of registration or identification issued by the state or to the citizen. Honorable Speaker, upon death, every dead person in Kenya, Honorable Speaker, is issued with a death certificate, meaning that the state recognizes that there once lived a certain person, and even the dead person, Honorable Speaker, in this country is entitled to human dignity and respect, so that that person is interred with a lot of respect. So, Honorable Speaker, I support this motion to the extent that even a dead person is entitled to human dignity and protection as provided for in the Constitution. Honorable Speaker, this matter also deals with the issue of health. Health is devolved, and we have a right as a country to take care of a person who is born up to the very end. Honorable Speaker, I know that a dead person in this country is not entitled to inherit property, but is entitled to equal protection of law, even upon death. Honorable Speaker, I call upon the county governments. The county governments in this country are independent, and for that reason, I call upon the county assemblies to enact legislations, to provide, to set up motions before the House, before the county assemblies. Honorable Speaker, I call upon the county governments, the county assemblies, to pass House resolutions so that it becomes mandatory for them to set up cemeteries. Honorable Speaker, this matter raised by Honorable Jalango here, Honorable Felix Oduor, is a representation of what is happening in the entire country. In Eldoret, we have a cemetery known as Kiplombe. That cemetery is full. Honorable Speaker, it is time that we, as a country, we look at the rights of even those who are dead so that they can be respected posthumously. Honorable Speaker, thank you.
Member for Narok North.
Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support my brother Jalango, because I think it is important for us as Kenyans to have a place where we can bury our relatives or our parents, our loved ones. Because there are 2 days that are very important, the day you come to this world and the day you go. And when you come to this world, you also want to own land. And the government and everybody and the law gives you the right to own land. And when you are leaving, you are issued with a certificate, a death certificate, and of course, it means you will be put somewhere. And for the loved ones, I think it can be very bad if you bury your father today or your son, and then tomorrow you move around and find that the animals have removed the body and here he is. You will really feel bad. So I think it is important for the county governments to look for money and look for land, to set aside land where we can be burying our loved ones. Because you know you love your daughter or your relative when he's alive. But after he has died, he turns to be something else. You cannot stay with that person in your house. And even if you stay with him, for how long are you going to be with him? And again, some cultures cannot allow you to say that the body will be burned, because you will never forget your loved ones. Because if you don't belong to the churches or the beliefs of burning somebody after death, then you will want to give your people or your relatives or your loved ones a decent burial. For that reason, I support my brother in saying that we need to set aside land that we can be burying people. Because there are few people who have land to bury their own people. It's only maybe in rural areas, like where I come from, we still have land. But when you go to the towns, there are so many people who are in towns, and even in Narok North, we will soon not have a place to bury our people. So I think it has come at the right time, and there is need, and it is important that the county governments set aside money and look for land that we can be burying our loved ones. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable members, the time allotted for this motion is spent. I would therefore now call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I also want to thank every single member that has contributed to this motion. And before we close down, let me donate to Honorable Tim Wanyonyi, member of Westlands, because ako hapa Nairobi, is from here Nairobi, and understand this issue. Then you'll have...
the Honorable Koda, you have 5 minutes, so you tell us how much you're giving to Honorable Wanyonyi.
2 minutes, 1 minute one way,
then that's it.
And Caleb too. Tafadhali.
And
Caleb
that means that when they finish, you won't say a thing yourself.
Because I'll have 1 minute left.
You won't have any. Go ahead, Honorable Wanyonyi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I would like to contribute to this motion. Honorable Speaker, when I was a councillor at Nairobi City Council, we set aside money to buy a cemetery, an alternative cemetery, and some people embezzled that fund. I believe the county government now has a duty and a moral duty for that matter to set aside money and buy a new site for a cemetery. Mr. Speaker, the Langata cemetery right now, if it's even invested with the criminals, people you can't bury, and people come and exhume the bodies and steal some of those things that have been used to bury the person, their coffin, the clothes and all that. So it is better that we give our loved ones a decent burial and be at peace, that they are resting in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That was...
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to salute my colleague, the Honorable Jalas, for these wonderful thoughts. It's good to think for those who cannot think for themselves, those who cannot say a voice for themselves. Honorable Dor, that was great that you thought wise on behalf of those people who could not speak as lying as dead. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, why am I supporting this bill, this motion? It's because, Honorable Speaker, when you are dead, you cannot talk, but you have a right, Honorable Speaker, within the provisions of the Constitution, that your life has to be, your immortal status has to be protected. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, many a times abuse of the dead should not be contained. And Honorable Speaker, it will be good that we think and invest on behalf of those who cannot be heard, those who cannot say anything. And in any case, Honorable Speaker, those who might have spent the money wrongly at that time when the budgets were done should now come out very clearly and say this is the route to go. Because after all of us are just on the same journey like those who have left.
Honorable Pamisi.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Jalas for giving me an opportunity as well as for his very timely motion. Jalango, you know, is my...
Order, what?
Yes.
Who is Honorable Jalas?
Honorable Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Felix Odiwar, MP for Langata. He is my very good friend, not just my good friend, he's actually my area member of parliament, as well as my former voter in Saboti before he shifted. and we share a lot. I want to contribute to this motion and want to say this. Langata Cemetery was started in 1958. And that was before we gained independence as a country. So you can imagine this is a cemetery that was started by the colonialists. Their intention, of course, was well informed. And at that particular time in history of this country, the population was not as it is. This is a menace that has been created partly by urbanization, which has increased the population of the people in Nairobi, and mostly people have come to seek fortune in this town. They end up becoming, total residents, and eventually, when their demise, they are buried there. So it is paramount that at this juncture we try and restructure that cemetery in terms of increasing the acreage, because 20 years the place was declared full. And a number of suggestions in terms of more allocation.
Honorable Miss, your time is up. You only had 1 minute, actually. The Honorable Jalango, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, once again, and to every single member who's contributed to this timely motion. We hope that we could have the Governor Nairobi be brought into this House, because even in their budget this year, this financial year, they did not allocate any money for the maintenance or procurement of any other space as a burial alternative. I want to just say thank you to every single member, and may God bless all of you. Asante.
Say, Honorable Member, when you are playing, say you beg to reply.
I beg to reply.
Thank you. Members will not put the question on that particular motion for obvious reasons, so I will call for the next order.
Order number 12, motion, development and implementation of a program for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period.
Honorable Mark Mwenje.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to move that aware that lack of access to ownership of productive assets, in particular to land, is one of the very serious sources of economic and social insecurity for Kenyans. Further aware that many communities, particularly in rural areas and informal settlements in urban areas, depend on land for their production and livelihood, and therefore landlessness affects their ability to secure basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. Concerned that for the urban low-income dwellers, the only way of accessing land to put up their dwellings has been to take up residence on land that is unfit for human habitation. Aware that the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of the Constitution guarantees every citizen the right to adequate housing and reasonable standards of sanitation, noting that there are many squatters that have settled on land that belongs to either absentee landlords and adjudicated land, public land, or community land for long periods of time, with some disputed, with others undisputed. Concerned that the issue of land settlement in many urban areas, particularly in the informal settlements, has remained unresolved, with numerous persons remaining squatters. Further aware that Section 7 of the Limitation of Actions Act 2010 provides for the right to claim for settlement on certain land after the prescribed period, recognizing the need for the Ministry of Lands to hasten the process of identifying parcels of land occupied by squatters where there are no disputes from any parties. This House resolves that the government develops and implements a policy for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period, including negotiations for financial settlements across the country to address the challenges facing the said squatters. Honorable Speaker, this motion, to summarize, is purely about regularization. Honorable Speaker, let us look at the value of land. It is the golden child of investment in this country. When our forebears fought for independence, they were fighting for land and self-rule. That was the main issue. wealth in our country is attached to land. We all know it. And it secures livelihoods. And we must look, why does land evoke such emotions in our country? Because it's a measure of wealth. I'm presenting the motion, Honorable Speaker. I wonder why, you don't know.
Honorable Dikiri, what's out of order?
The motion is supposed to lead us as it is, and thereafter, then we can tell.
What is out of order?
Because he's debating.
That's what he did. The motion is his. He has done the right thing. He has presented the motion and is now moving the motion. That's how it's done. Resume your
I stand collected.
Resume your seat, Honorable Dikiri. Go ahead, Honorable Mwenje. Don't allow Honorable Kirima to keep misleading.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think the Honorable Ndikiri is just taking a jibe at me. And I'm just presenting the motion into context to allow for debate.
He can't be allowed to bully you at all.
Honorable Speaker, land it secures, it's all about food security. It causes conflicts between communities. It gives communities identity. And for us as Africans, land is all about personhood and giving us our full humanity as an African. Honorable Speaker, allow me to just note some points from the National Land Policy of 2009, a document that has been brought before this House, that it provides that the National Land Policy is supposed to guide the country towards efficient, sustainable, and equitable use of land for prosperity and posterity. The overall objective of the land policy is to secure rights over land and provide sustainable growth, investment, reduction of property. Those are the issues that have been highlighted in this policy, Honorable Speaker. And all citizens must have the opportunity to occupy land, to do economically viable projects on this land, and we need efficient and effective operation of land markets and transparent land dispute resolution mechanisms, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the issue of informal settlements, the national policy states, and I quote, the essence of informal or spontaneous or squatter settlements is the absence of security and tenure of planning, Honorable Speaker. This same land policy, in order to address the challenges of informal settlement, has said we take an inventory of the genuine squatters, determine the land occupied by these squatters, establish appropriate mechanisms for removal of squatters and their subsequent resettlement, planning for land and finding that is found to be suitable for human settlement, ensure that informal settlement is developed in an orderly manner. Honorable Speaker, I want to emphasize on the three next points under this national land policy. Facilitate negotiation between private owners and squatters in cases of squatter settlements found on private land. Another point under the national land policy is facilitate the regularization of existing squatter settlements found on public and community land for purposes of upgrading development. And another key one, establish a legal framework and procedures for transferring unutilized land belonging to absentee landowners to squatters and people living in informal settlements. Honorable Speaker, this motion, I brought it because 40% of land is unadjudicated. The government hasn't come up with a regularization plan. And sometime, Honorable Speaker, I hope to bring a bill that will substantively deal with this issue, Honorable Speaker. There are over 1 million who are residing on land that either belongs to absentee landlords or unadjudicated land, public land, or community land. It is also worth noting that there are settlements where the occupants and the owners of the title have ongoing disputes, and there is room for negotiation to discuss some of these matters, Honorable Speaker. There are court orders that cannot be implemented. You cannot evict some of these people. They've developed, they've stayed there for years. The demolitions that have been done have been inhumane. Honorable Speaker, we talk about inadequate housing, and yet we want to demolish, and our failure to regularize it will lead to that inadequate housing, especially for us in Nairobi. It has given conmen the advantage of the chance to con people who are trying to get the title deeds of some of this land, and the use of that land has been ineffective. Honorable Speaker, this motion shall have some benefits, Honorable Speaker. The government shall be able to issue more titles, create wealth. We shall have tripartite regularization, where you have the owner, the occupant, and the government to check that that has been done properly. County shall collect more rates, Honorable Speaker. The government shall be able to collect more taxes. We shall sort the issue of housing. We shall prevent uncontrolled development, Honorable Speaker. Sewage and water, Honorable Speaker, which is a problem for us in Nairobi. We shall be able to sort that out under this motion once passed. We shall stop demolitions. And Honorable Speaker, the President himself guaranteed that he does not want to see demolitions. Let us not forget how it was in 2016, 2017 to 2018, when we saw all manners of demolitions going on, especially in the Eastlands area. This must come to an end, Honorable Speaker. It shall discourage land invasion, because this is for a prescribed period and people will know there is nothing for free, Honorable Speaker. We shall be able to do roads, new towns shall come up, public utilities and schools and hospitals will be provided for, because as long as we are regularizing, we must provide for the public utilities that are required, Honorable Speaker. And we shall be able to reduce the court workload and encourage out-of-court settlements, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, demolitions, which is one of the issues that plagues our country here in Nairobi, have led to loss of life and property. We have a chance to stop that with this motion, Honorable Speaker. The court cases are there. They've been there for 20, 30, 40 years, and they will never recover that land, Honorable Speaker. One court order that I saw, the police requested, in order to do the demolitions, they need 3,000 police officers to be able to evict close to 20,000 people. It is impossible. It will never happen. But we have a chance here through regularization to sort that issue, Honorable Speaker. We must be brave to face this problem. Let us not postpone this problem. Every government that has come before has postponed this problem. Honorable Speaker, I have a ward in Molem where 60% is land that is unadjudicated. Yet it is one of the most populous wards in this city, in Nairobi. I have a ward called Karubangi South. I have another village called Alexin that we need them regularized and given their title, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Embakasi West constituency, Embakasi constituency, Honorable Speaker, and I'm hoping you'll add me some 3 minutes, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, that...
Seconds, member.
Honorable Speaker, I just need to emphasize this point, that the late Embakasi gave birth to 6 constituencies, courtesy of the late Maori Moshiri, the late Mwenje, and Waitito. We need to solve these issues, Honorable Speaker. We sort the land problems once and for all. The President promised to support.
Can conclude.
Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, we are looking for a win-win solution for everyone. That is the purpose of this motion. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move, and I ask the Honorable Maungu to second this motion. Thank you.
Honorable Maungu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity that I have this morning to second this all-important motion on regularization of land in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, land is a very emotive matter and a very emotive subject in this country, because year in, year out, Mr. Speaker, we have experienced cases where demolitions have happened, causing people to be homeless, at times maiming, at times even killing people, Mr. Speaker, because there has been some contestation on matters land, Mr. Speaker. It is true that we may need to have a policy that will regularize the way these unsettled people are settled, Mr. Speaker. And as pointed out by the proposal of this motion, Mr. Speaker, some of this land may be community land that has never been adjudicated, Mr. Speaker. Some of this land may be public land or absentee landlords, Mr. Speaker. We have a matter in this country where we have a few people that hold large parcels of land, and we have many people, Mr. Speaker, who end up squatting on this piece of land. Therefore, having a policy that will prescribe the minimum or maximum period under which that land can be given to the squatter, Mr. Speaker, to avoid cases of whereby people are invaded in the wee hours of the morning, Mr. Speaker, and left homeless. Mothers and kids are left without a house, Mr. Speaker. When you know that housing, of course, is one of the basic requirements Mr. Speaker, for decent living, as captured in Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's important that these people are given decent accommodation, decent living, and that can only happen, Mr. Speaker, when such people are not having their houses, however good or bad they may appear, Mr. Speaker, destroyed in the wee hours of the morning. I therefore stand to support this motion, to second the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, I wish to then propose the motion for the development and implementation of a program for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period. That aware that lack of access to ownership of productive assets, in particular to land, is one of the very serious sources of economic and social insecurity for Kenyans. Order. Further aware that many communities, particularly in rural income dwellers, the only way of accessing land to put up their dwellings has been to take up residence on land that is unfit for human habitation. Aware that the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of the Constitution guarantees every citizen the right to adequate housing and reasonable standards of sanitation. Noting that there are very many squatters who have settled on land that belongs to either absentee landlords, unadjudicated land, public land, or community land for long periods of time, with some disputed while others are undisputed. Concerned that the issue of land settlement in many urban areas, particularly in the informal settlements, has remained unresolved, with numerous persons remaining squatters. Further aware that Section 7 of the Limitation of Actions Act 2010 provides for the right to claim for settlement on certain land after the prescribed period, recognizing the need for the Ministry of Lands to hasten the process of identifying parcels of land occupied by squatters where there are no disputes for any party or parties. This House resolves that the government develops and implements a policy for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period of time, including negotiations for financial settlements across the country to address the challenges facing the said squatters. The first person to have at this chair would be the Honorable Member for Central Imenti.
I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this important motion. First and foremost, on the onset, I support the motion by my colleague, Honorable Mwenje, as relates to the people who are squattering in various parts of the land. Only to say that there's no land which come from even like Imana. Every land at its origin of where it comes from or who owns it and who has been an occupier, especially in rural areas where we know that land has been owned by grants and the communities. Honorable Speaker, there is nobody in Kenya who can be saying that he just came from nowhere. Every person has its own origin. But Kenyans have a way of how they just like to expand and occupy even what does not belong to them. So there must be check and balances. There must be a policy of how to regulate, of how to take care of those who are in genuine squatters and who are not in genuine squatters. There must be a way of checking and counter-checking who have been born, because there is a law which I've been talking about. When can one acquire land which does not belong to
that individual. In common law, we have what we call adverse possession. That's one is very well provided in law, whereby if one occupies a piece of land for 12 years and that occupation of 12 years is not disputed or it's with the permission of the owner and the owner is not bothered, then that a person who is occupying or squatting in that land can go to the court and have his occupation validated by the court and will be given title for that piece of land. Then there's another issue whereby one occupies a piece of land, but the owner of the land has started claiming that you are in my land longly, you are occupying my land longly. This one, I refer to a piece of land which mainly is owned by a certain community and another community just come in and set in. And the two communities started disputing or squabbling about them. At the end of the day, you have even bloodshed. I have one church piece of land like that one in a place called Mutembei in Meru, whereby we have an issue of Meru and Daraka, whereby the piece of land is owned by people of Central Menti. But in the due course, vendors, squatters, it came from very far, up to from Kitui and others from Daraka. They occupy the same, and there has been pull tag fights now and then, whereby people have been killing one another. Like that one, it cannot be said that it's an adverse possession, because you see, there are those who are disputing and there are those who are sitting on the same land by force. So there must be a differentiation when it comes to the government policies to know who has been occupying what part of land and with the consent of the other one, and if this land has been having owners before, and if there has been having owners before, what can be done? Is it a monetary compensation? If not so, is it a policy whereby these two communities can be talked about and live in peace in such a manner, or whereby if squatters just get in and occupy somebody's plot, the government cannot come up with a policy of protecting a squatter who will just migrate from nowhere and get in and start occupying somebody's plot by force. Because you see, Kenyans like not free things, but Kenyans like to do things where they are not forced by law in one way or the other to react to the same. So what it is that genuine squatters must be considered, but there is nobody who comes from heaven. They are all Kenyans, and there is no land which comes from heaven. It is owned by somebody or by a clan. So there must be a policy which protects both owners of the land and the squatters at the same time. I support the motion, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Member for Kandui.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this motion. At the outset, let me thank the Honorable Member for Embakasi, Honorable Mwenje, for bringing this motion at this particular time. Honorable Speaker, the fight for independence for this country could be equated to the fight to recover lands that have been taken by the white settlers. And our Constitution, the 2010 Constitution, which we gave to ourselves, dedicates a whole chapter, chapter 5, on matters touching on land and environment. As clearly pointed out by the mover of this particular motion, land is a very, very emotive issue. Land is a factor of production. Land is almost a measure of somebody's status and wealth in this particular country. But if you look at the Constitution, it says land belongs to all the people of Kenya, either collectively as communities or as individuals. And in the usage of land, you look at Article 60, it says land shall be used in an equitable manner. Honorable Speaker, the issue of squatters in our country is a time bomb which we need to tackle as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, it's going to create a security problem in our country. It is unfortunate that at this time, we still have many Kenyans who are still living as squatters. Some of them courtesy of having worked for the former settlers. Some of them because of a trade where they got employed and they began working for some people, but they have no titles. You will come across many people in this country who have stayed on parcel land for close to around 80 years, but they have no titles to that particular land. They are literally squatters. if we move to around the country, the Constitution creates the environment and land codes. We move to those codes and find those codes are clogged up with many cases where people are claiming titles to land. You find out there are too many cases. You'll find out people have ended up being killed because of these disputes over titles to land. Our land registers have not been very, very fast in generating up titles to enable people get titles. So it is important at this time, as opposed by the move of this particular motion, that we develop a comprehensive policy. I know, Honorable Speaker, we move to the courts. There is the concept of adverse possession, where somebody, after if he has stayed on a parcel of land for a period of more than 12 years, peacefully, without any interruption from any other person, is entitled to claim that particular land. But you see, the process which we have now is that that person has still to go to court, even after having stayed on that parcel of land for 12 years, without any interruption from anybody. He is forced to incur that expense of going back to the court so that the court can be able to declare that right. Honorable Speaker, it is my view that it is high time that once the prescriptive rights have accrued, the concept of adverse possession has accrued, that person ought to technically get that particular time without the necessity of having to move to court for the court to specifically declare that. Honorable Speaker, I support this motion that we need to revisit our land laws to have a comprehensive regime so that we can actually be able to settle Kenyans who are staying on parcels of land as squatters in their own country. I support this motion by the Honorable Mark Mwenje and hope it will see the light of day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members, join me to welcome pupils from Suswa Lerai School, Narok East in Narok County, and students from Mamtaz Academy, Matuga in Kwale County. They are welcome to follow our proceedings this morning and afternoon. This chance got the member for Lugari. Remember, let me just say this. If you are caught in the chair and you are next online, I will not give you a chance. Just keep your seat. I follow the list so that we're able to get everyone else speaking based on the time they logged in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to add my voice to this motion by Honorable Mwenje. And first, I want to thank Honorable Mwenje that indeed in this country we have a group of Kenyans whom we have dehumanized by calling them squatters in their own country. Over 54 years after independence, Speaker, we have land that is not being put to economic use simply because we have a group of Kenyans who are holding land hostage, and yet, as we are today, we are having a problem of food security. We are having a problem of people in urban centers not being able to make a living because they don't know whether that land belongs to them or not. I'll give you an example, Mr. Speaker. In Emirates, in Langas area, land measuring over 1,000 acres being occupied by people. They have not been able to use it economically simply because they have not been regularized. Simply because they do not have titles of that land. And therefore, even if they want to develop that land, even if they want to approach a bank, to approach a financial institution, they cannot. And therefore, they have been rendered economically useless as citizens of this country. Mr. Speaker, I come from a constituency where 34,000 families live on a land that since 1992, when that land was given to them by President Moi, they have not been able to regularize it. They are being called squatters. Anytime a madman may wake up and decide that that land belongs to Mwenje or belongs to Nabi, he can chase them out. And yet, they are Kenyans. We have developed schools in that area. We have developed hospital facilities in that area. We have developed other markets and other facilities. I was disturbed last week, Mr. Speaker. We got a donor who wanted to develop a very big market, but he could not do it because the land has no title. He could not do it because the county government could not allocate land that does not have papers. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, request this House that we cannot just stop at this motion. We must come up with a time frame within which all these kind of people are settling on land that has not been regularized. It must be regularized. We must also go further, Mr. Speaker, and define regulations and rules to this House that will be adopted, that will lead the Ministry of Land to regularize this land. I therefore support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member Polikoni. Commissioner, you could use the mic just in front of you or the next to you, the one next to you. I don't remember, use the one next to you.
Okay. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, hata mimi nimpongeze Mheshimiwa Mwenje kwa sababu ya hoja hii ambayo ni hoja muhimu sana. Haswa tukizingatia ardhi ni kiungo muhimu sana katika uchumi wetu kama taifa, na pia tukizingatia ardhi ni kiungo muhimu katika mambo ya kilimo, na hata ya kwamba sisi wa Kenya lazima tuwe na makaazi katika taifa letu kama ilivyosema katiba katika sura ya 4 ya kwamba serikali lazima ihakikishe imepatia makao wa Kenya, na hatuwezi kupata makao ikiwa hatutakuwa na ardhi. Na kwa hakika ardhi limekuwa tatizo nyeti sana na tatizo sugu sana. Sugu kwa kiasi cha kwamba jamii kwa jamii wameweza kuingia katika vita na mapambano makali. Hata tumeona familia pia wameweza kupambana na kuwa na mizozo kwa sababu la swala la ardhi. Na nataka niseme ya kwamba serikali iliyoko na serikali pia za nyuma zilizopita wamejaribu sana kuhakikisha ya kwamba wanaweza kufanya ile tunaita Kiingereza settlement scheme ama mpango wa makazi. Na katika kufanya mambo haya mipango ya makazi ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba Wakenya wamepata ardhi na pia wamepata hati miliki ya zile ardhi. Hivi sasa tukiangalia katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, ukienda sehemu ya bonde la Ufa, ukienda sehemu ya mwambao wa pwani na sehemu zingine katika taifa letu la Kenya, utapata tuko na maskwota wengi sana. Na hawa maskwota wengine wako katika ardhi zile tunaziita kwa Kiingereza government land, GL ama ardhi za umma. Na kuna wale pia ni maskwota katika ardhi za watu binafsi. Na kuna wale pia wako maskwota katika ardhi ambazo ni za watu ambao hawajulikani na hawaonekani. Na hii ni kwa sababu tukiangalia historia yetu, hapo nyuma wabeberu walipokuja katika taifa letu la Kenya, waliweza kunyakua ardhi zetu. Na wengi katika wale baada ya kupata uhuru wetu, waliweza kurudi katika nchi zao na wakaacha zile ardhi. Na ardhi zile, kuna watu ambao wameenda wakaishi katika ardhi zile kama maskwota, lakini mpaka sasa hawajapata hati miliki. Na kuna wale watu ambao ni wajanja, wanapitia kule wakichukua pesa, wakisema wao ndio wana hati miliki ya zile ardhi, na si kweli. Wanawatoza pesa nyingi na inakuwa ni njia ya kupata pesa kwa watu ambao hawafanyi usawa katika taifa letu la Kenya. Hivyo basi ni muhimu sana
tuwe na ile kitu tunasema tuangalie takrimu mwafaka ya kuona zile ardhi ambazo ni za umma katika taifa letu ambalo ziko na maskota ni ngapi na ni kiasi gani katika kaunti zetu zote 47, na zile ambazo ni za umma na ambazo serikali pengine haina matatizo ama haina utata katika ardhi zile, basi tuweze kupatia Wakenya wale hati miliki. Vile vile pia serikali inaweza kutumia fedha, kutumia ile tunaita Land Trust Fund ambayo huwa iko, kuweza kuwanunulia Wakenya kwa kuwalipa wale ambao walikuwa wamemiliki ardhi zile lakini hawaishi pale na kunaishi maskwota, kama vile mfano ya Waitiki ile ilifanyika na serikali ya nyuma. Hata pia sasa serikali ya sasa naona iko katika mpango ya ile ardhi ya Masurui kule Kilifi, kuweza kulipa familia ya Masurui na wale maskwota waweze kupata ardhi zile. Kwa hivyo hili ni jambo ambalo litaweza kusaidia Wakenya kuweza kupata makao na kuweza kupata hati miliki. Vile vile hivi sasa tunaona kuna miradi mikubwa ya kiserikali ambayo inakuja katika sehemu tofauti. Kwa mfano kule kwangu kuna ile ilikuja inaitwa Dongo Kundu bypass ile barabara, na kuna ile special economic zone. Na unajua wale wakaazi wanaoishi pale wameishi kwa miaka mingi, na wakati mwingi waliishi kama katika ardhi ambayo ilikuwa ni ardhi ya umma pasi na kuwa hati miliki. Sasa hivi serikali imetumia kile kitengo cha kwa Kiingereza inaozungumzia compulsory land acquisition, ya kwamba watachukua ile ardhi ili kutengeza ule mradi wa umma ambao utafanyika pale. Lakini swala lina
muongeze sekunde 30.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Swala hili ni muhimu, najua umeniongezea kidogo, lakini kuna pahali muhimu ambapo nilitaka sana kuzungumzia. Na niseme ya kwamba wakati tukifanya hivi, kwanza tutapunguza ufisadi wa wale ambao wanaangalia ardhi ambazo si zao, ni za umma, ni ardhi za wale absentee landlords na wanaweza kuzinyakua. Pili, tutapunguza pia mambo ya ile tunaita Kiingereza professional squatters, yani Wakenya kuwa maskota kwa muda mrefu. Tutawafanya Wakenya waweze kuwa na ardhi, hivyo basi kilimo kitaendelea, hivyo basi uchumi utaendelea, hivyo basi pia makazi tutaweza kuyapata. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka niseme tuzingatie sana kile kipengele cha kwamba mtu anapokaa zaidi ya miaka 12 katika ardhi, mbali na mtu kujitokeza kusema ya kwamba ardhi ni yake ama kuleta utata, ile tunasema occupants in good faith kwa Kiingereza, watu hao waweze kupatiwa hati miliki na waweze kumiliki hizo ardhi, kwa sababu hiyo ndio njia tu ambayo itatuondoshea mizozo na siasa zile za mambo ya mashamba na zile sehemu nyingi, hata ile ambayo tunasema historical land injustice ama historia ya kizamani ya mambo ya mashamba, tutaweza kuimaliza tukiweza kufuata njia kama hizo. Kwa hivyo nakushukuru sana Mheshimiwa Mwenje, lakini isishilie katika mswada tu ama hoja, tuweze kutengeza mswada mwafaka ambao utaweza kuzingatia na kuwezesha masuala haya ambayo tumeyajadili hapa sisi kama wabunge, ili tatizo la ardhi liwe ni tatizo ambalo tunalizika katika kaburi la sahau. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Kwema kabisa. Member for Chepalungu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity, and equally, I would like to congratulate the honorable member who has come up with this motion, so as a country we can discuss in detail on what can be done so that the ministry can be able to identify the actual and the real owners of this particular land, and after identification, the government can now move with speed and give proper documentation for the owners who are legally occupying the land, and for those who are illegally occupying the land, Mr. Speaker, action can then be taken against them. As I thank the honorable member who has come out with this particular motion, Mr. Speaker, if I can take back this house to a question I had given to the minister, to the CS for lands, while he was here answering the questions, I had given a particular attention to squatters
living within my constituency. The squatters are found in urban centers, and equally for those of us members of parliament coming from rural constituencies, we are equally faced by the same challenges. I am particular to owners of land next to Shogiroi, a village, a small village called Legetetiet. They gave out land to the government. They were promised that they were going to get title deeds for their land. But it's now 3 decades, Mr. Speaker, and nothing has been done. I had asked the minister that if he can take action about the same, so that people who are living there can be able to get proper documentation of their land that is going to help the people and the squatters. Equally, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, and may his soul rest in peace, the husband to our honorable member from Molo actually passed on while fighting for his people, or while fighting for the people who are squatters, not even squatters, they have titles, but their land has 3 terms, as it was mentioned by Honorable Ngeno from Emuru Adigiri. The land there still have, because the land there is still under caveat. The land there, the people there are not able to use their title because their land is still under caveat. It's time the ministry and the minister and the CS comes up with a clear policy on lifting up the caveat, because our people cannot continue living with the same challenges. The challenge faced by our people in Kuresoi South, in Kuresoi North, and I am really hoping the members were here so that they can debate and actually fight for their people. And because I'm here, I can equally say this particular issue was in the court. I'm not certain on the process and the proceedings, how it happened. But Mr. Speaker, as I stand, I would like to support this. A case in Bomet Town recently, as we fight about the people who are occupying land without proper ownership, again, a government can come and occupy a public land. A case in Bomet, there is a fight between prisons and the county government, which has forced actually the county government to dump waste next to a secondary school called St. Michael's. This fight has gone on for the last 5 years, and that is why this particular motion is very important, because the land that the prisons are claiming, it's their own, has actually prevented the county government from constructing a road that will lead to a dumping site. You can imagine the smell that is coming from the waste that is being dumped outside St. Michael's Secondary School, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we are so particular about this case, and we're really urging the ministry to come up with a policy as quickly as possible so that such cases can be handled and to be solved as urgently as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Member for Waldai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of this motion, and allow me to thank Honorable Mwenje for bringing up this matter on land issues and squatters. The truth of the matter is that for a long time, ever since independence, or before even independence, Kenyans have had issues with land matters, and it is the very reason when the 2010 Constitution was being promulgated, there was the office of the National Land Commission that was set up, because there was a feeling that the Ministry of Lands was not able to tackle the issues that had come up on land matters. And this particular office, the NLC, were tasked with, among other issues, to settle squatters. But up to today, it is still a problem, and it's still an issue that we are experiencing. And as a motion in this House today, in the year 2023, when this office has been around for another 12 or 13 years, it begs the question as to when then will these issues ever be sorted out? Because these people who are called squatters, really, if this Kenya is not their home, where else can be their home? And I stand to speak here, Mr. Speaker, because my community, where I come from, Aldai constituency, they may not be called squatters, but they don't have titles. So at any time, they can also be evicted from the very land that they have called home for forever, for centuries. They have buried their relatives, they have invested, and they cannot even use that property to gain facilities in banks like any other Kenyan. And I therefore then urge that this particular matter, as much as Honorable Mwenje is talking about specific squatters, I think a commission should just be set up to look at all the squatters and all the land that has not been titled. There was a time the Kenya government had actually taken action and said that they were going to to give people titles, but that exercise faded away. We have moved to a situation where we are talking about automating land ownerships and land parcels, whether community, public, or individually owned land. But even then, this has not sorted out the problem, and the problem continues to grow. And as we continue, we get new people going to squat into people's land, and they then, because of adverse possession, which the courts normally finally rule, then an individual perhaps is denied of land, or even that particular community, someone can come and decide to say that that is their land, and if they are able to get their way through the courts, they are awarded that land at the expense of the community that has lived in those pieces of land. So going forward, as much as we want to set up to sort out these quotas, specific quotas, I propose that the whole country, or we come up with a commission that specifically looks at every parcels of land in every part of this country. And if that can be segregated to the various regions, because every issue, land issues are local, and if the communities within the locality, chaired by perhaps the old men who have been there, who know the history of this land, together with the leadership in that particular area, can help resolve these pieces of land. In my constituency, for example, there are many portions of land that have not been titled, and all that they require is titling. And that process, if it is done, then that issue is sorted out. When you move to other areas like Nairobi or other town centers, we find now where squatters came and they have lived in those particular areas, and going to demolish people and demolish homesteads, so demolish homes where people have called home. That is the only properties they have and the only assets they have, and it is demolished and it is thrown away. Then you return these people back to poverty. Yet we are supposed to be dealing with growing people, moving them from poverty to the next level of life. So I support and I thank Honorable Mwenje for bringing up this particular motion, and we look forward to a better solution on squatter management issues. Thank you, I support.
Thank you, members. I wish to recognize in the speakers gallery peoples from Kwakulu, or is it Kwachulu? Honorable Ekomas, how do you read this? Kwachulu or Kwakulu? In the public gallery, Kwakulu Primary School, Yatta in Machakos County. Must be Kwachulu, right? Must be Kwakulu Primary School, Yatta in Machakos County. They are welcome to follow proceedings this afternoon. The member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion because, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion. We humans are terrestrial. We live on land and we can live nowhere else. And yet you find there are few people who own very large tracts of land. Many times this land is actually unutilized. And it is these large tracts of land that are unutilized, and the presence of people who have no land to live on, that leads to the presence of squatters. They have to live somewhere. And Mr. Speaker, because these lands are not recognized as being owned by them, this is also the same reason that actually leads to development of slums, particularly in rural areas. Because we keep saying these pieces of land are not legal, the possession is not legal, therefore the residence there is not legal, and therefore no development can take place, disadvantaging these people in every way every way possible. You find that at times their houses are demolished, children find places they have lived and known as home for many years are now being demolished and they have nowhere to go. So this motion to regularize possession by staying is actually important. I support it. However, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of practical issues that we really have to address. One is the current legal statutes relating to land and the slow judicial process that we have. Mr. Speaker, cases of land, like other civil cases, take so long that families literally grow up and generations grow up when these cases are still in court. That is an issue we really have to look at. So, Speaker, there is also the issue of the commitment of the government to resolve these issues, basically because of vested interests. So, Speaker, it has gone on to an extent that honorable member who spoke before me was saying that we need a commission to look at all these issues of land. And yet we all know, Mr. Speaker, that there is the Ndulu report that looked at all areas of possession of land, all issues of squatters, all issues of illegal acquisition, all issues of suspect acquisitions, and actually got the way forward. This particular report has never been discussed. Perhaps if it had, it would have solved some of these problems. Mr. Speaker, we also know that the lack of commitment by the government has actually led to a situation where at this time the processes of acquisition of land seems very doubtful. The integrity of title deeds have become doubtful because buyers follow the legal processes as laid down in government procedures, and eventually at the end of it you find that that position is questioned and there is even efforts to actually evict them from those pieces of land for which they have titles. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this motion is in time, and the policy should be looked at in terms of private land, absentee landlords, community land, and adjudicated land. And adjudicated land and public land should actually not have a problem because the people who live there as squatters are Kenyans and therefore should be supported. The principle of advanced possession may be helpful, but if you have to do that, this motion should actually be progressed to an act of parliament that can look at all the issues that have gone through the existing land statutes, the existing processes, so that this regulation can actually be practiced.
Thank you. Member for Isiolo County. I'm aware she doesn't have a card, so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion, and I really want to thank Honorable Mwenje for the effort bringing up this matter. Mr. Speaker, while we are here discussing the existing squatters and why we need to regularize the land that they are currently occupying, our inaction, or rather mismanagement, of land in this country continues to create more and more squatters. And if we are not able to address this matter conclusively, we will have a situation where across the country, every piece of land we will have squatters occupying. And this problem can only get bigger and more complex. Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this because of the area that I come from, that is Isiolo County. 80% of the land is considered community land. While we require registration to happen because the law is in place and it is clear how community land needs to be registered, we've continued to experience laxity and inaction from the institutions that are mandated to actually undertake this registration. Mr. Speaker, what we are seeing currently is the fragmentation of rangeland, a land that is supposed to support, free ranging when it comes to pastoralism, is now being fragmented for different use. Different competing use that undermines pastoralism, where we have conservancies coming up, taking up a big chunk of land, where we have big projects like LAPSET and the roads, the Horn of Africa Road, taking up big chunks of land, individuals carving off big chunk of land and trying to register as a private land, all these actually disorienting how pastoralists undertake pastoralism in this community land because of the fragmentation that keeps on, destroying the movement and the access to key natural resources that they've always been using. And Mr. Speaker, as these projects, for example, like the LAPSET and the roads, the Horn of Africa roads happens, we are disadvantaged when it comes to compensation because every time community members come up for compensation, they are being told this is undeveloped land. There's a reason why we leave our lands undeveloped. It's for purposes of, practicing pastoralism. So in essence, they're telling us, since it is community land and it is undeveloped, then there's no reason for compensation. And for the few who have got, properties developed on this land, they're told because they don't have registration certificate, they can't be compensated. The only thing they can compensate is the properties on those land. So, Mr. Speaker, as we consider regularizing land across this country for purposes of, protecting the squatters, let's also, the institution mandated, take keen interest on ensuring that community lands are registered and secured, because unless the registration happens, there's no security that we can actually be talking about of community land. So I stand to support this motion, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me time.
Well done. The Honorable Member for Westlands. Honorable Ngunyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also to contribute to this motion, I want to congratulate my colleague, Honorable Mwenje, for bringing this motion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of land in this country has been mishandled for a long time. And the first government of this country is the one that mismanaged land from the onset. Because when the colonialists handed over the government, the independent government, Mr. Speaker, was supposed to regularize land and resettle people who had been thrown out of their land by the settlers. And Mr. Speaker, instead of doing that, they went into a crapping spree and went on crapping land left, right, and center. And we find many communities were displaced. People lost their homes, and now they have been permanently squatters in all over in the country. In Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, where we have the largest squatters in informal settlements, some of these lands, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the Nubians in Kipra, these people have lived there forever. And Mr. Speaker, over every government has promised to give them title deeds, ownership of that land, but still it has never happened. So it is time that we must now be serious to see how we can resettle Kenyans who are living on land that does not belong to them. And some of that land, Mr. Speaker, you find that there are people who just speculate with it. There are no owners, there are no non-owners, but there are people who collect rent from it. So it is the government now, the National Land Commission must now take stock of this and regularize how Kenyans are going to settle. There are over so many other people who have been displaced from their homes, Mr. Speaker, because of political alignments and on like that. We have had, Mr. Speaker, like for example, 1997 and 1992, after election, some people were thrown out of their land because they voted in a particular way. And that also has left them squatters up to now. And it's now that the government must now look into issues of settling Kenyans. I just want to further the case in Zimbabwe when Robert Mugabe, the president of Zimbabwe, decided to regularize land in Zimbabwe and give back land to the Zimbabweans, the original natives. Mr. Speaker, he was condemned by everybody around the world, and he was misunderstood. But he was solving a problem that will have been overblown with time. And this, Mr. Speaker, the squatters in this country is a time bomb. If we don't manage it properly right now, it is going to happen some other way, and it will not be very good. Because on this land, Kenyans are there, and these Kenyans are procreating, Mr. Speaker, and we want also to see that no Kenyan should live in this country when it doesn't know where he belongs. Sometimes those children are born in that place, but they have no home. Some of those people have no known home where they can go. It is only that place because they were born there and they live there, and everything else it's around there, Mr. Speaker. So it's upon the government and us to legislate and make sure that no Kenyan lives as a squatter in this country, in an independent Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this, and also wish that maybe Honorable Mwenje should move further and now make this into a bill so that we can now make it into law and make sure that some of these issues we are talking about, we don't just pass them here and they remain just on the shelves, that they can be implemented and Kenyans can benefit from this legislation, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Kibwezi West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, and from the outset, allow me to thank our colleague, Honorable Mwenje, for bringing this very important motion for discussion in this House. Mr. Speaker, as you would know and many Kenyans know, land is a very emotive issue. The problems that we face as a country relating to land emanate and have historical origins. You are all aware that when the colonies came to our country, they took away our land. And the freedom struggle that we had, call it Mau Mau, wherever it was majorly about land and freedom. And finally, when we gained our independence and we gained back our land, problems did not end. You would recall that at independence, when those who were in the forest fighting came back and they found that their land had been taken away by the white settlers, black settlers, our own people, taking money from the British government under the Mackenzie program, took away their land of our own people, and our people continued being landless. They were taken to different parts of the country to be resettled, and the problems continue up to date. Through the Moi regime, you would recall that at the time, the 24 years of the Moi regime, land was used as a political tool, where those who were loyal to the system and those who were supporting the system were rewarded by way of being given land, and continued the inequalities that we face to date. Mr. Speaker, this House would also take note that at around the year 2005, 2006, up to about 2012, there were concerted efforts in this country to initiate genuine land reforms through that which was called the National Land Policy. That was adopted, and later, when we programmated a new constitution, Kenyans thought all the problems that we have been experiencing about land would be solved. Sadly, many years after that, after the promulgation of a new constitution and the enactment of many laws by this parliament to resolve land problems, we still have land issues in our country, and that's why Honorable Mwenje comes to this House with a motion seeking that those occupied land be regularized so that the land becomes
legally and rightfully theirs. Mr. Speaker, as we support this motion, I think there are two key issues that we need to look at. There are genuine squatters. There are genuine people who occupy land and do not have title to that land. But Mr. Speaker, we are also aware that there are people who form themselves into groups, invade land, so as to create a semblance of ownership so that they can get title to that land in a manner that is fraudulent. And so, as we support Honorable Mwenje's motion, we must be able as a House to separate, and that's why I gave the historical genesis, so that we do not add into the problem, to separate between people who genuinely occupy land and people who have just invaded land for the purpose of acquiring it through fraudulent means. Mr. Speaker, you are aware that in this country, land is categorized into three major categories. There is private, there is public, and there is community land. And when we get into this issue, we must also be able to look at people who have settled on private land, whether the land is actually theirs, people who have invaded government land because they think government, it is easy to invade and gain ownership fraudulently in government land, using cartels, also working for government, and people who may have obtained title to community land because maybe the communities that are occupying the land are complacent or may not know their land rights. Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, and as I finish, I have people in Mali, Kenyan land farmers, who have been historically occupying their land, but you realize they are farming on the land, but somebody comes from Nairobi with a title to say, this is not your land, I have a title to this land. These are the issues that we need to resolve. I have people in Ngo settlement scheme who for many, many years have been fighting for their land rights, but up to date, they have never gotten their title deeds. And so as we welcome Honorable Mwenje's motion, we want to encourage that the land issue be taken very, very seriously. Kenyans cannot keep fighting for land almost 60 years after independence. A time has come when we must put the land question to a close so that every other Kenyan can occupy their land and can get title to their land and can transact with their land.
Thank you. Member for Isambu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying that in Kenya, land is considered to be very variable. And Kenyans we all know that in the life of a human being, in the final analysis, when one exits this world by way of death, Mr. Speaker, the remains have to be taken back to a piece of land that is 3/6. So, Mr. Speaker, you can see how land is variable in the whole world, not even in Kenya. But, Mr. Speaker, when the Ministry of Lands was created to manage land, we thought that they will be up to that task. But I can say, Mr. Speaker, all the major problems we have in this country is a result of the mismanagement of the Ministry of Lands. We have heard of double allocation, Mr. Speaker, of land in this country. And to an extent, what Kenyans do, Mr. Speaker, because the disputes of land in this country are quite emotive, most Kenyans take rule in their own hands, where the Ministry of Land is unable to streamline or to settle a dispute. Any land dispute, when it goes to it is taken to court, it takes a very long time for court to determine. Mr. Speaker, if it is
matter on squatters. Every honorable speaker who has contributed to this motion has mentioned about the advanced possession, a very clear rule on land. Mr. Speaker, we have very nice rules of land. We have them in place, but they have never been implemented. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that the Ministry of Lands be added another department of enforcement, because taking, for instance, that rule on advanced possession, if the Ministry of Land, Mr. Speaker, can be able to enforce that rule, I believe lands disputes, as far as they are concerned, Kenyans and even squatters, they could be sorted if that rule is implemented, the advanced possession. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate and also to thank His Excellency the President, because in my area, Musambu constituency, we have an area which is occupied by squatters. They have been there over 30 years. And afterwards, Kenyatta University came to claim that that land belongs to them. And there has been a dispute, even in court, Mr. Speaker, but I thank His Excellency for his intervention, because he has done his intervention whereby Kenyatta University has agreed to have that parcel which is occupied by the Kamae squatters, which is approximate 191 acres. And now, Mr. Speaker, we are happy that all those quotas will be settled, and the issuance of their titles is on course, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the issue of land, we believe that the Ministry of Lands has not done as expected to make sure that all matters which are of dispute in regard to lands and...
Thank you. Member for Cliffy South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I want to join the rest in congratulating Honorable Mwenje for this motion. Mr. Speaker, the challenges that have risen up for Mr. Mwenje actually to think of coming with such a motion are issues which the entire country is grappling with, because we all know land is a basic necessity. And as many have alluded, the issue of rehabilitation, regularization being historical, Mr. Speaker, it's very embarrassing. 60 years after independence, we are still discussing this matter. Mr. Speaker, while this problem could be historical, in quite a number of instances, it is actually deliberate by our own civil service. Kilifi South is not an exception, affected by the issues of land. Mr. Speaker, upon independence, surprising enough, 80% of the government land, if you do serious audit, you will find out it comes from the coast. And people and cartels have really taken advantage of that. When we have so many people who are landless, we have so many people with big chunks of land having acquired it illegally. Some are speculating on it, while others have their own in use. Mr. Speaker, I have two cases in Kilifi South which I would wish also to take them as an example of the need for this motion. Mr. Speaker, in Kilifi South I have Vipingo Development, Vipingo Trading Center, which is within Junju Ward. Vipingo Trading Center is a center that has recently come up very fast. One, it started during the colonial when Vipingo Development Company started sisal plant at Vipingo, where communities from very many parts of East Africa came to seek for labor at the Vipingo Development Company. And over the time, Vipingo has really grown. Then came Vipingo Ridge, we have Centum, and we have had so many other companies which have come there. So Vipingo area is one area that is so potential. Mr. Speaker, sometimes in 2013, just as what my colleague has said here, title deeds were issued to the people of Vipingo. But these title deeds were issued haphazardly. The intent was more of the political interest than for the members to occupy, to have title deeds for their land. So in that hurry, some people were given pieces of land where they don't belong. Rather, you find somebody has constructed, he has actually buried his people there, he is actually doing farming there, but this, when the title deed came, you find that the title came in somebody's different name. You find that a title deed has been issued, but the person who has been given that title deed does not even know where even this land is. So when we talk about regularization, we are talking of a serious matter here. This is a matter that needs a clear policy from the Ministry of Lands, so that eventually everybody can get somewhere, can call home. Mr. Speaker, the worst that has been happening, because the provincial administration is the one who is charged with the responsibility of security within areas where people are living. You find somebody taking advantage that he has this title, he knows very well this is not his piece of land, but he uses the provincial administration, using influence with money to harass people. Others are taken.
Ten seconds.
So what has been happening, Mr. Speaker? There are people who are genuinely suffering in places of land where they rightfully and legally supposed to be living in. They need, therefore, to support this motion, and if possible, escalate this motion further to a bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Magarini.
Asante, Mheshimiwa Speaker.
You shall not call chair from your seat.
Asante Mheshimiwa Speaker kwa kunipatia nafasi hii. Kwanza nimpongeze Mheshimiwa Mwenje kwa kuleta mswada huu kwa wakati unaofaa. Mheshimiwa Speaker, kuhalalisha mashamba kwa maskota ni jambo la busara, na niseme limechelewa, kwa sababu wananchi wengi wa Kenya wanaishi katika ardhi ambazo wamezimiliki kwa muda mrefu, lakini bado wanaitwa maskota katika ardhi zao. Utapata ya kwamba ardhi nyingi ambazo zimekaliwa na wanaoitwa maskota ni ardhi za jamii. Ardhi hizi za jamii ni ardhi za jadi, za mababu na mababu, ambazo kwa sasa inastahili wanaozimiliki waweze kuhalalishiwa. Pia vile vile, hali hii imechangia unyakuzi wa mashamba. Nikichukua mfano, Magarini kuna mashamba mengi ya chumvi,
mashamba haya ya chumvi yametengewa ardhi ambazo ni sawa kwa kukuza chumvi, lakini baada ya muda wameweza kujiongezea sehemu zile za ardhi kwa kutumia nguvu zao za kifedha kwa Wizara ya Ardhi na kuchukua mashamba ya wenyeji ambayo yamejaa minazi, miembe na pia vile vile ambayo wanayatumia kwa kilimo. Hali hii imezusha sitofahamu na ugomvi katika mashamba ya chumvi na wenyeji. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu utasaidia mahali pakubwa iwapo tutaupitisha na kuutekeleza. Kuupitisha peke yake haitoshi, tunastahili kuupitisha na kuutekeleza. Kamati ile ya utekelezaji ichukue hatua haraka kuhakikisha ya kwamba huu halalishaji wa mashamba kwa maskota unapata kutimia. Pia vile vile hali hii ya uhalalishaji ikaweze kusambaa mpaka kwa mashamba yale ambayo yanamilikiwa na watu ambao hawaishi hapa nchini, kwa Kiingereza absentee landlords. Mheshimiwa Spika, wengi Magarini wamekalia mashamba ya hawa mabwenyenye ambao hawaishi nchini kwa miaka zaidi ya 100 na ili hali bado wanaitwa maskota. Ni vyema na napongeza serikali, maana imejitolea ya kwamba itanunua mashamba haya na kuweza kuhalalisha maskota ambao wanakaa katika mashamba haya. Mashamba haya tumeweza kujenga maskuli, mashamba haya tumejenga misikiti, mashamba haya tumejenga makanisa, na bado hata makanisa na misikiti ni maskota juu ya mashamba haya. Iwapo mswada huu utapita na pia vile vile kutekelezwa, basi tutakuwa tumesaidia wananchi wengi wa Kenya. Pia vile vile kuna watu binafsi, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambao wamejitolea kuweza kutoa mashamba yao kwa serikali ili serikali ikaweze kuyanunua mashamba haya na kuweza kuwahalalishia maskota wanaoishi katika mashamba haya. Mheshimiwa Spika, pia vile vile ningeuliza tu Wizara ya Ardhi ikaharakishe uhalalishaji wa mashamba ya jamii katika maeneo ya Adu, Bungale, Chakama. Unapata ya kwamba hali hii ya kutokuwa wamehalalishiwa haya mashamba sehemu ya Shakahola ndiyo imeleta haya matatizo haya, lakini wapo shamba zile zingeweza kuhalalishiwa wenyewe, na tumai ya kwamba wengine hawangepata nafasi ya kupenya na kufanya uhalifu ndani ya mashamba haya. Kwa hayo machache ya mengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, ninasema asante kwa kunipatia.
Honorable Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this motion, and I must congratulate the Honorable Member for Embakasi West, the Honorable Mwenje, because this motion brings a very critical matter that goes beyond even the issues that he is raising on bringing up a policy. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Mwenje is a Member of Parliament in a Nairobi constituency, and so am I. But the history of land in this city is scary. To imagine that there are squatters in Nairobi, in a place that has been a city with a history replete of disinheriting of people, that the people who we call squatters in Dagoretti South constituency today were actual owners of the land where they are being called squatters today. In fact, in the city, they are not called squatters. They are called people living in a place called parking. I never get to understand how these places are called parking. That you are parked in an area by the colonialists so that you can be unpacked whenever they wish to unpack you. Mr. Speaker, we cannot discuss about land issues or bring about new policies without revisiting history. Mr. Speaker, why we have such big problems with land in this country is because of the colonial policy hang-ups that we suffer from. Mr. Speaker, the Land Ordinance Act of 1902, the Land Ordinance Act of 1915,
The very founding documents of disinheriting people of their lands in Kenya are the ones that inform the historical injustices that we suffer till today. So, Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to first commend the honorable member, who is a very ranking legal practitioner, because by bringing this motion, he pierces our conscience to start relooking at our land policies wholesome. What has been happening, Mr. Speaker, is that when a matter on land comes up, we make a small law at some small corner about that small problem, trying to resolve a small mischief, never once wanting to attend to the broader issues that are affecting land that are bigger than the small laws that we make in the small corners, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would want to encourage the Honorable Mwenje to take up this matter, craft it into a bill, so that now we start attending to the issues, not only of historical injustices, not only of the small issue of squatters, not only of the small thuggery that is happening, not small, the big thuggery that is happening in lands offices across the country, so that we once and for all address the land issues in this country holistically, Mr. Speaker. The issue of titling in this country is a big matter. Today, Mwenje, who is the mover, as a lawyer will tell you that he is not even in a position as a legal practitioner to verify what a proper title is. Today, you could be holding a legal title, thinking that you own land, only to find that there are photocopies or copies of other titles that are claiming to be legal on the same piece of land that you're claiming, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I would want to accord more time to more members because I know there is more interest. I would not want to add more than that, than to encourage Mwenje to make it into a bill so that we can address the issue of land more holistically, rather than the small cocoons of legislation that we have been trying to do to attend to land issues. Mr. Speaker, let me spare some time for some other members. Thank you very much.
This seems to be a Nairobi MP's issue. I'll give this chance to the honorable member for Starehe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this motion by my colleague here and my friend here and my Deputy Minority Whip, Mr. Mwenje. Thank you for bringing up this issue, because we've always had issues land in this country, and I think the 13th Parliament should go down in history as a parliament that really addressed the issues of land in absoluteness. We have a very big challenge when we demean our people and call our people squatters in the 21st century. These are human beings, people who actually are entitled to a life that is dignified. So basically, this is a very emotive issue, and I tend to take issue with the National Lands Commission because I think they have slept on the job. Most of these issues that we're talking about have happened under their noses, and they have not had adequate measures to address these issues in absoluteness. The other day when we were discussing matters digitizing the land operations, a member noted that we really need to address the issue of land ownership in absoluteness, entitling our people so that even if we are to make people pay rates and rents of these lands, Mr. Speaker, we should have people knowing what they own in absoluteness. We have a company from America called Google, and I'm interested in how they've been able to map out all the roads in Kenya, all the lanes and all the places in Kenya, and the government of Kenya cannot actually even map out the lands that are in Kenya and give people titles, because we need to address that issue from there. We have a challenge with these big corporations owning huge chunks of lands which lie idle for a long time, and these lands tend to attract people who come and make the lands productive. Then after occupying the land for some time, we start calling them squatters and evict people who have invested and have made these lands profitable, and have made these lands actually become a source of income for so many people. We have a corporation like the Kenya Railways with huge chunks of land, some bordering markets like Wakulima Market in my area. That land is lying idle where you have congestion in Wakulima Market,
We've been actually requesting them to cede off some land so that people in Wakulima market can stop putting their wares on the road. And actually, because we're in a progressive society, the population grows every single day. And matters land, I think, Mr. Speaker, is an issue that we should also take it progressively. Some government corporations should cede more land to these people. And those people who have occupied these lands as quotas in informal settlements should be given title deeds so that they can know in absoluteness how they can develop their plots, so that these cases of fire outbreaks can stop once and for all, so that the interests of these lands can be known. We have so many land grabbers who are grabbing land in Pangani through the county government. The county government of Nairobi is actually offering this land to these scrupulous land grabbers in the name of private public partnership, who end up erecting high-rise buildings that do not benefit the public, and these are built on public lands. We also have the issue of economic unlocking, because so many people in Nairobi own parcels of land, but they don't have title deeds. And these are people who are business people. If they are to be given these titles, they will go to the banks and get money and develop this country and unlock this country economically. So this is an issue that should be actually corroborated in a lands reform bill so that we can move this country forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I support this motion by my friend. Thank you so much, Mr. Mwenje, and I love our support at the commission. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Members, allow me to recognize in the public gallery pupils from Bright Future Academy, Larry in Kiambu County, and pupils from Chep Keteret Primary School, Keio South, Elgeyo Marakwet County. They are welcome to follow proceedings this afternoon. Member for Kibra, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think, as you can see, that this matter of land...
You haven't even logged in to speak.
This matter of land, you can see, is like it is a Nairobi affair. All the Nairobi MPs are here because we are the most affected as Nairobi citizens. You realize that it is very, very emotive, and I must thank my good friend Honorable Mwenje for having brought this motion. He is himself first-hand person who knows what a land problem is, because his constituency, I know for a long time, has had land issues. That does not mean that all the other constituencies in Nairobi are good. I am from a constituency, Kibra constituency, where we have the highest number of squatters, and at the same time, it is in Kibra where the land rate value is the highest in this country. People do not know that Upper Hill is in Kibra, and that is the place with the highest value for land. When we look at the squatters, they pay rents to absentee landlords, yet they do not have title deeds. It is time that this government comes up with a policy that those who have advanced, those who have stayed in places should be given title deeds because they are born and bred in those places. We cannot have a country where after 60 or so years, people are still being called squatters. In my constituency, the government, like every succeeding government have always promised people to be given title deeds. But this has been happening at the whims of the leadership, and after that government has gone out, the problem goes again. We are saying that the leadership of these constituencies must be consulted, must be involved, so that the distribution and regulation of land ownership is sorted once and for all in this country. This has been a problem since independence. We cannot believe that some people in this country are still landless and they are called squatters, and they live without knowing that tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, just allow me to continue. You know, Kibra has the biggest population and is the biggest land in this country.
Honorable Kagiri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. And I would want to thank Honorable Mwenje for a very timely motion. Honorable Speaker, as my fellow colleagues speak, squatters sound like a Nairobi issue. However, it's an issue of the whole country. And if I mention about my county, Laikipia, which is the Texas of Kenya, every person who finds money in this country rushes to Laikipia to buy property. However, these people turn out to be absentee landlords who want to speculate for land for more than 20 years. They allow squatters to occupy those lands or people to occupy those pieces of land, but never give them free occupation or allow them to progress on those pieces of land. These are Kenyans who can be very productive, but with the uncertainty are not able to do much. Honorable Speaker, I support this motion because we need to discourage that culture of where people live untended land. In the county of Laikipia, these absentee landlords have caused a lot of insecurity because when you leave a person who is not the owner of the land to occupy it, and illegal grazers come on that land, you cannot justify why you're chasing them away because the land is not also yours. Honorable Speaker, I support this motion considering that only 33% of Kenyans own land. The remaining 77%, where are they supposed to live, or rather 67%, where are they supposed to occupy if we buy the land and just leave it there? Finally, Honorable Speaker, the issue of title deeds must be taken care of. In my county, we have Kandutura, we have Manguo, we have Maina, we have Liki. We have so many areas that require the title deeds issued, and I believe with that Kenyans will be productive and Laikipians will be successful. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the motion.
Thank you. The Honorable Mwenje, this is your chance to reply because the time for the motion is spent.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm saying, am I able to donate perhaps a minute to the Honorable Ndikiri there, and Chief Oromodo, a minute each, Honorable Speaker, then I'll reply.
Yes, but the Honorable Oromodo will get a minute, yes, but next time he puts his card, he should be in the house, because we called him his name earlier and he was not in the house. The Honorable Ndikiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, this is an emotive matter of land, and I really support the motion by my friend, Wakili Mwenje. Mr. Speaker, this is not an Nairobi matter. I come from a constituency with the largest number of squatters, the rural constituency in Kenya with the largest number of squatters. We have squatters in the rural areas. The people who used to work in forest, the people who used to work in large-scale farms, who are forced to live in squatters. My constituency body, Mr. Speaker, we have Geshagi, we have Riverside, we have Machaka, we have Kaihili, and so many. So I think the time has come, and I'm looking forward to work with Mwenje to draft a bill on how to regularize these squatters. It is very important that every Kenyan be given a right to own land so that they can receive the best development partner activities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to confirm that I've been here for all the time. Second, I want to take this opportunity to support Honorable Mwenje for this very important motion, and I want to say this is a chance where now Kenyans can be assured that we sort the issue of historical land injustices. In my constituency, the issue of absentee landlords, especially in areas of Kichakamkwaju, Majoreni, Kiwambale, Jego, Kiwegu, Yungi, and Minanasini in Zombo area. These are areas where the people who are living in those parcels of land ought to be guaranteed that they will be actually be settled, because now this is a chance where now we are stressing that Honorable Mwenje, instead of having this motion as it is, we need to actually make sure that we do a bill so that now all these people are cautioned and the issue of absentee landlord will be addressed once and for all, because we need to ensure that the issue of land is addressed once and for all, because it has been a thorn in the flesh of Kenyans for so long, especially in Lungalunga constituency. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank all the members for their contribution, including the senior members. Honorable Speaker, when I first joined Parliament, the Honorable KJ advised me that you pick a cause and stick with it. This is my cause, you can clearly see it. Education as well, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there is the issue of identifying genuine squatters. The way we've crafted this motion is that they will be able to identify genuine squatters so that people don't take advantage of this issue, Honorable Speaker. And adverse possession takes forever, Honorable Speaker, as has been noticed. With absentee landlords, Honorable Speaker, then who would you go against in court? This is one of the issues that my constituents, Honorable Speaker, we've noticed. Now, the other issue is regularization should not be done in bars and in hotels. It's been done very informally, Honorable Speaker. This motion is meant to stop that, to create an office where regularization is done in a tripartite manner, where the government gets involved. And that's, Honorable Speaker, we have successes in places like Embakasi ranching. It's when the president, the former president and the current president got involved in that issue and participated. That's why you're seeing titles coming out in some of those areas, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, people are being conned when regularization is being done in hotels. I think the Honorable Mishimboko highlighted that, especially from our constituency. This is what we are trying to stop, Honorable Speaker. The Land Commission has failed, we all agree, and it is time. We've done this motion because of the time that we have now. Honorable Speaker, I'm working on a bill, and I look forward to getting members to join me as we work on a substantive bill that will address this issue once and for all. And Honorable Speaker, we must be brave. Let us be brave. Let us give these quotas their titles so that we solve this problem once and for all. With that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply. Thank you.
Well said. I think the members, the motion is spent, and question on it will be put the next time the motion is scheduled out of paper. Honorable members, time now being 9 o'clock, this House stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 16th August 2023 at 2:30 p.m.